Welcome to the Fantasy Audiobook. Marvel Comics. Devouring the God Genes. Chapter 61. Eno, guess where I am? As soon as the call was connected, Tony heard the roar of the aircraft engine. Are you 300 tails without silver here? Eno's keen hearing has also heard the plane soaring in the sky. Tony has approved temporary flight permissions for this downtown area. He will land on the stage of the Expo as an Iron Man. What kind of palladium element poisoning I can just run for nothing just to see the gods? Wearing here for 2 hours will not work. Ha ha ha. Tony laughed a few times. At 8 o'clock exactly, Iron Man is coming on stage. Eno helplessly asked Angela to hang up, and then she put the phone back in Eno's trouser pocket. Tony is a little crazy now. His palladium poisoning has reached 19% during this time, and it will be even higher afterwards. And the speed will get faster and faster. 8 o'clock. It's time. The entire New York Fair in Flushing began to emit giant fireworks. It will explode in the uppermost sky of New York, emitting the most beautiful starlight. At this moment, a bikini woman wearing an Iron Man brand walks onto the stage from the side of the backstage. On the 5 stages, they started dancing with super rhythmic music. Tony also jumped off the transport plane wearing Mark's armor. Eventually he fell to the center of the stage. And the fully automatic loading and unloading manipulators that were underground also began to dismantle Mark's armor. Accompanied by spicy dance and music after the final end. Tony also started speaking. At this time, in the lounge on the inside of the stage, Angela's Trio 3 is sitting on the sofa to rest. And this location is the VIP room where the stage is viewed from the side, that is, the rest area. Eno looked at Tony's speech. He is always so low-key. Upon hearing Eno's words, Angela ended and whispered. They seemed to be discussing something just now. She glanced at Tony and said, actually, I think Perkin is also very hard. Zhao Hailun agreed with him. After a while, Tony ended the speech. He began to play his father, Howard Stark's video, which is the New Element City map. Eno put his hand on his chin and looked at the map. To be honest, it's not something you know. You will never think of the array of new elements in this map. But you can't get the new element technology just by looking at it. It requires a computer to replicate and simulate a rearray to get this technology. So looking at Marvel, do you think Iron Man is the best? No, it's Iron Man his dad. Just kidding, don't take it seriously for men who were able to research new elements decades ago. It's just a bad time. Hi, what's so nice about my father, Eno? At this time, Tony finished the speech and walked to Eno. Eno turned his head to look at this one who was still, Tony who was so supportive. Are you happy today? Happiness. Tony gestured to the stage. Of course I am happy, but today is the New York Expo we are holding together, why do you seem to be unhappy at all? Eno nodded, motioning Tony to sit on the sofa to his right. And Angela is sitting on Eno's left, and her left is Zhao Hailun. At this moment, as soon as Tony sat on Eno's right, Angela pulled Eno's sleeve. Eno looked at Angela. Angela raised her hand and motioned to Eno to listen. Eno leaned forward. Angela whispered in Eno's ear. When Tony was far away, Helen and I saw that his body surface was abnormal. The skin is dark blue, the eyelids are slightly black and green, and the movement of suddenly bending down at the beginning is also a bit problematic. Ordinary people will definitely not be able to see it. Only we have this power of observation. Since he came to you just now, I skipped it and judged that there is no problem. He should have been infected with a certain toxin, and it must be a toxin-like body failure. Do you need to tell him? Eno gave Angela a slightly surprised look. This vision is comparable to S.H.I.E.L.D. The agent is much better. Just hope. At this level, it can be seen that Tony is poisoned. Although Angela can't accurately determine Tony's toxin, it is straightforward to judge that it is inseparable, 89, which is not very wrong. Tony heard that Eno didn't speak for a long time, and turned to see the two of them whispering again and then said, you have a whisper, but you don't take me to listen. At this moment Eno has already turned around. He observed Tony a little bit, and he was right with Angela. Eno looked at Tony and said in a serious tone, Tony. Tony tilted his legs and turned his head. Generally, those who call the name and wait for a reply are important questions. Tony, let's talk. What's the matter? Did you forget to bring the product and ask me to get it for you? What kind of poison have you been poisoned? Eno directly and simply asked. Tony's eyes widened instantly and his pupils shrank. He put down his cockturling legs, turned his head back and touched his chin with one hand, thinking. But after thinking about it for a long time, since the umbrella bio company must have seen something, it's boring to hide it. Tony spread his left hand and pointed the arc reaction furnace in his heart with the index finger of his right hand. Palladium is poisoned, but it doesn't matter, I can solve it. Are you crazy? Eno looked at Tony with an idiot's eyes and said, are you going to change your body organs or change your personal palladium element poisoning to a certain degree? It can't be restored. Unless you don't use it, the umbrella can't solve this poisoning, and we can't make a heart. No, no, no. When Tony heard that he wanted to use the arc reaction furnace, he refused directly. I am Iron Man. This is one with me. It is my internal organs. Then do you know the consequences of palladium poisoning? Eno stared at Tony. You will die the most painful, and it's ugly. Palladium absorbed by palladium is quickly transported to liver, kidney, spleen, adrenal glands, lungs, bones and other organs. You will have organ failure, kidney failure, everything will fail. You will urinate with white blood, just like milk. Your bones and muscles will be soft, just like a shrunken person. At the end of your life, your whole body will turn black, just like a piece of carbon. After Tony listened carefully, the whole body was shocked. He was a little scared and said, it sounds scary, but I still choose it. After listening to Tony, Eno decisively turned his head and waited for Howard Stark's video to come to the stage to give a speech. Tony ignored his Eno difference and said, hey, you don't want to keep me, in case I change my mind. You treat me like this, I am really sad, but we are still good friends. Eno said without looking back, your life is not mine, why should I persuade you to be useful? Tony choked when he was said, shrugging his shoulders, indeed. Eno just came out with Angie. How about Tony? He can solve it himself, and he understands himself. Everyone is an adult, and they are responsible for what they do, and they will also bear the consequences of their own decisions. Tony is okay and glances at Eno. He also thought that Eno would be like what is said on the internet. What do you know is that your friend will die, and then you will give up your life to help your friend. In the end, through the layers of suffering, the friend is saved, the relationship between the two people is deepened, and the story ends. But the result of the fact is that people don't care about themselves at all. I know that it's okay to take off the reactor, but I still don't want to take it off. Tony also knew he was responsible for his decision. So in the end, it turns out that Eno knows him better, but he doesn't know him. But don't say it yet. Tony prefers people like Eno. After confirming the problem and dictating, it is simple, direct, trusting, and supportive. This is much better than others who have been verbally for a long time but have not done anything well. Correct. Eno suddenly turned to look at Tony, who had just looked at him, and said, if you are going to die, please call me. You will help me. The feeling that you are a best friend emerged in Tony's heart. Do not. Eno turned his head to look at the stage. I'll collect the corpse for you. Recently, we are also considering the technology of converting organic matter into chemical fertilizer. Tony. After thinking about it, Tony put his arms around Eno's neck and shoulders, and said, help me research some potions to suppress this palladium element poisoning. Eno said without looking back, don't you want to solve it by yourself until you die? That also takes time. Tony leaned over to Eno and said, if I use the armor continuously, I may not have even a few days. If I don't use it at all, I may live for a few years. These times are my last time, I have to fight for myself. Eno turned his head and looked over. At this time, Tony was wearing a suit and tie, and his hair was well combed. But still indifferently discussing the question of how much time he has. The will is not bad. This has to give an average person this situation. He was crazy early. Eno turned his head and said casually, it's not impossible to study special medicines for you, but I want to robbery. Tony smiled. You are the first man to rob Iron Man. Correct. Eno nodded. Iron Man is dying. Tony agrees, it is indeed Iron Man who is dying. He decided a little bit, then patted Eno on the shoulder and said, "Your body is not good, it is better to be paid, a Mark suit. He can protect you from any threats, and protect your body, which is not even an ordinary person." As a mortal, Tony knows that Eno is weak. His body is even more uncomfortable. So Tony thinks that the reward is a steel suit, it should make Eno happy for a long time. But to Tony's surprise, Eno responded flatly, "You are doing a loss business. The research and development cost of a special effect medicine is only technology. It may cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, and it will only sell you several million. But do you know how much your Mark's armor is worth? I remember you said it was billions of meters of gold." Tony smiled happily. He didn't care. "I know your body may be more uncomfortable than mine. The reward as a Mark's armor, isn't it good? He can make you omnipotent. From now on, as long as you can wear it, no one can threaten you." "Oh, right," Tony suddenly reminded. "That, except Tenjin and Hulk." Eno ignored this Tony. He is now sure that Tony is going crazy. He can buy a steel suit with just a few 100,000 meters of gold. Seeing Eno ignoring himself, Tony, heart aches. She covered her suit's chest and said, "You won't die, right? I have to rely on your special medicine to continue my life." Eno looks at Tony. "The reward must be Mark's battle armor. I have many sets of these things, what's wrong with using one set for payment?" Tony stopped Eno's shoulder and said, "My shareholders all want to develop more weapons. The national government hopes that I will hand over the technology of the arc reactor. People I know, they want my money and technology. But you are the only one who treats me as a friend, and you tell me that I am poisoned. However, there is nothing else on my mind. It just reminds me that it's time to pay attention to my body. So in my acquaintance, I am now thinking of me as Tony instead of Iron Man, only you, Pepper and Harpy. Oh, by the way, Happy is my driver and bodyguard." After Tony finished speaking, he accidentally saw Angela and Zhao Hailun in his spare time. He hurriedly moved next to Eno and added, "You are together, so they should be the same." "No, they actually don't care. You." Eno looked at Tony, who was talking about life with him. "He actually wanted to express that I don't need Mark's battle armor. This thing is a sword by itself, and it is troublesome to charge." Eno looked at Tony. Tony shrugged at Eno and puffed his hands in front of Eno. "It means that handshake cooperation is, agree. No thought, no hesitation. Pop." Eno and Tony shook hands. "Whether it is making money or earning battle armor, I have done what I should do. Tony couldn't stop him if he wanted to send him off. Although I don't use it. Then put it there as the exhibits in the lobby of the Umbrella building." Eno took out his free left hand and patted Tony on the shoulder. "After 3 days, remember to ask someone to protect the Umbrella building to get the special medicine." "So fast?" Tony asked. "Isn't it difficult to develop this thing? The case of palladium element blood poisoning is close to nothing in the world, and yours is basically the first case." Eno told Tony Cope, "The only treatment for palladium poisoning is chlorophyll. We only need to strengthen it and make a more powerful special medicine. If you expect you will have to endure hardship." Eno looked at Tony and said, "There should be a blood thinner and a tonic to drink, but there is no doubt that the tonic is hard to drink." Tony made a bitter expression on his face and said, "It won't be bitter, I hate this most." "Wait, I'll ask Angela." After Eno finished speaking, she turned around and asked Angela, "What does the chlorophyll drink taste like?" "I haven't drunk it, but it should be the worst batch of medicines in the world." "Okay, give Tony a moment of silence." Eno turned his head and looked at Tony's eyes, looking forward to the good news with regret. "She's not sure, but it's absolutely super ugly." "My goodness." Tony covered his face with his right hand and sighed. This must be the worst news he has recently received. Second only to knowing that he was poisoned by palladium. At this moment, Jason came with the umbrella box. He put the box next to Eno and said, "The video will be over in a few minutes. I will help you lift the box." Tony saw the box that Jason brought up, and he was immediately interested. Is this the new limb technology of the umbrella? "By the way, there are still a few minutes." Eno said to Jason, "Take out the palm of your hand." Jason nodded, knelt on one leg and unlocked the fingerprint lock of the box. "Then take out a palm and bracelet from the inside and give it to Eno." Eno took these and threw these to Tony and said, you can control this hand by wearing the handle ring on your wrist. Tony didn't wear it first, but carefully looked at this exquisite palm and said, this is almost catching up with the hand of the Times Weekly girl from the previous issue. Eno said silently, I deliberately made this look better than the average person. If it is too good looking, there will be problems. Tony nodded, this is a normal sales strategy. Then he put on the bracelet and prepared to control this hand. Eno looked at the crowd of thousands of people in the audience. There are more people outside who can only watch live broadcasts. Actually, this new umbrella technology conference has nothing to do with many people. Eno looked at the crowd and said, even most of the people here are irrelevant. Although Eno directly used the beginning of the cold field at the beginning. But there was no regret from the crowd. Instead, I waited quietly for Eno to continue speaking. Eno don't care. The audience reacted and continued. After the latest World Organization investigation, there are hundreds of millions of people with disabilities in the world, of which physical disabilities account for the largest proportion, reaching nearly 40%. My goodness. Before Eno finished speaking, there was an upsurge of wonder in the audience. Those who have a little understanding will know what the umbrella is going to release this time. It must be related to physical disability. Eno helplessly waited until they were quiet and continued. They all wear prosthetics and wear ugly accessories, and they are reported uncomfortably discriminatory. But now, they don't need it, because the umbrella has developed the latest technology. Speaking of this, Eno paused and looked at the crowd. They all held their breath, looking forward to Eno's next words. But it hasn't waited for Eno to speak. The audience shouted, I'm almost out of breath. Ha ha ha, the crowd laughed instantly, but they all took another deep breath. Eno pulled the box over on the stage. This action instantly attracted everyone's attention. They all stared at this box. This latest technology is. Eno pressed his hand on the fingerprint unlock and said, nano-neurobiomechanical limbs. Finish talking. Accompanied by the sound of air pressure, Eno opened the umbrella box. He turned the front of the box. Let everyone in the audience see the contents of the box. In the perspective of the people in the audience. The interior of the box opens into a stepped shape, and the lowest step faces them. There is a delicate arm on the steps. If it weren't for Eno to say in advance that this is a prosthesis, I'm afraid others would think it was someone's hand. And beside the arm, there is also a flesh-colored bracelet, which is the same color as the skin. Wow! For an instant, most of the people in the audience stood up. They took various professional cameras and started shooting this prosthesis. Someone yelled, is this a real hand, Mr. Eno? It makes no difference if you treat it as a real hand. As soon as Eno finished speaking, someone asked, with it, there will be no physically disabled in the world. No, no, no. Eno refused, it's not because of it, there is no physically disabled. But the person who buys it will no longer be physically disabled. Wearing it, you will be no different from a normal person. Although I have done charity, I can't give away to all the people in this world. You all know the truth. Why you are so rich, and this technology, why don't you give products to those, the disabled who don't have money? These words are here in Eno. Moral kidnapping does not exist. Wow, click, click, click. In an instant, more camera shutters sounded. But one of them was desperately squeezing the stage. Next, I haven't waited for Eno to act. The people in the audience shouted, hurry up and show it. I can't wait. Eno's hand is raised, indicating that you were right. Standing on the table, Eno looked at the crowds in the audience so much that it could only look at the first crowd and said, if I come to test, it can't express anything, so. Although it is not good to ask like this, I still have to ask if there are any physically disabled people here. You will be the first person in the world to experience biomechanical limbs with umbrellas. I. Suddenly, just after the voice fell, a thin figure in the crowd squeezed forward with enough strength to feed. But even if she worked hard, the crowd was still too crowded, and she anxiously wanted to come forward and could only shout what she had just said. Eno saw his backhand and pointed in that direction, let her come up. As soon as the words fell, the crowd consciously gave way to the little girl. Seeing the opportunity, the little girl ran up hard. As she runs, you can see her short sleeves flying in the air with her right hand. Yes, Her right arm only reaches the position of the elbow. None of the following. She finally ran up, holding her left leg with one hand, and she was out of breath. When I heard you say about the physically disabled from behind, I started to get excited. At that time, I thought that maybe the most dreamed day of my life is coming. Now, thank you, my dream is not broken. Eno looked at the girl who was bowing to herself and asked, "Get up, how old are you?" "Age." The girl stood upright and wiped her tears. Eno reached out and took the biomechanical hand over. "You are young, you have a long future." After checking her tears, the girl looked at Eno and said, "Yes, but Mr. Eno is younger than me." Quote. Eno's hand. Ha 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 ha, the audience immediately laughed. In society, everyone knows that there is another magical place about the umbrella. That is, it is only 18 years and 10 months this year. What this means is that the future of the umbrella is immeasurable. Eno asked, "What's your name?" "Beth Fergus," the girl said. "Okay, Beth." Eno asked again, "Your right hand?" "A drunk driving accident involving the perpetrator. I was riding a bicycle, and then it became like this." Beth raised her right hand with only her elbow. Who can feel that a young and beautiful girl suddenly becomes a monster without a hand? How many strange looks did she endure? Eno removed the part above the elbow of the biomanipulator, leaving only the position of the elbow. "Then take this part and hand it to the girl together with the bracelet, without talking nonsense. This is your brand new beginning." For a moment, the girl's tears filled her eyes again. For a brand new beginning, she said this to herself countless times in her dreams, at night, and when she was crying. But then, why can you come back with your hands? She was just comforting herself. But Eno's words are true. It really is a fresh start. The girl Beth didn't even care to wipe her tears, and took the biomechanical hand from Eno. "Raise your right hand," Eno said, now that the girl is holding the biomechanical hand in her left hand. That bracelet can no longer be worn. As the first customer of the umbrella, she is considered the first person Eno to personally equip her. Beth held her lips in surprise. She can actually be worn by Eno herself. Click, click, click. For a moment, the audience thought of Fierce again. This group of reporters have even thought about the title now. The first girl in the world to accept umbrellas and equipment. She became the luckiest girl tonight. Do you know who she is? What are you doing? Looking at the girl in a daze, she was still looking at herself in disbelief. Hearing Eno's reminder, the girl suddenly reacted. She raised her right hand, her short sleeves drooping on her broken arm. Eno simply wears the handle ring on the big arm, and the whole process is actually just hands-on. The girl's excited body was trembling. She looked at Eno as if she was asking for advice. Eno motioned to her. "Bring it." The girl excitedly put the biomanipulator on her right hand. A moment to bring it. The biomanipulator emits a faint light. It automatically adsorbs the upper arm and starts to adjust the appropriate size. Then the nano nerve control bracelet also emits a faint light. After 3 moves, the two devices stabilized together. The girl looked up again and looked at Eno. She didn't know what to do next. She was already a little bit stunned. She is almost disconnected. Eno looked at her. "Try to move." The girl stared at the biomanipulator. This sentence is really unfamiliar to her. "Concentrate. Control the arm." Now even the audience in the audience began to hold their breath. They are extremely looking forward to this link. Finally, the girl flicked her fingers. At this moment, the girl Beth looked at Eno tremblingly. She is anxious to share her joy. Eno nodded to her and encouraged her. The girl then tried again. "My fingers moved. They started to bend. Wrist moved. Start moving. The elbow moved. Started to twist." The girl's tears are getting more and more, and it is getting more and more urgent. Finally, her tears poured out and dripped like a broken wire. She threw herself into Eno's arms. I cried loudly. Ooh, no one can forget this clip after experiencing this incident personally. This kind of hope after despair makes you feel after the dawn and being redeemed. This is the truest portrayal of this girl. The girl cried, and suddenly, puffed. All of a sudden, she knelt in front of Eno. Eno immediately walked around when he saw it. He didn't want this. But the girl is still reluctant. Where does Eno go around? Where does she go? In the end, Eno leaned on the podium and said helplessly, I will retract this arm if I kneel again. The girl smiled and wiped her tears, stood up and said, how much is it? I think I can't live without it. The girl thought, since this hand is so powerful and the level of technology is so high, the price must not be low. The chapter is over, and tomorrow will resume 5 times normally. The difference from the previous 1005 is 2000 words later. The update time is 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock in the morning, 8 o'clock in the evening, 8, 0, 9, 99, 10, 10, 11. But no matter what, the girl swears that she can't live without it. Do you think it is expensive? Eno looked at the girl who stood up again and said, guess how much it sells. The girl's face immediately showed a tangled expression. Since it is a buyer, I naturally hope that the price will be lower. But everyone knows that this cannot be too low a price. The girl hesitated for a while, she finally vomited a price, 10,000 meters of gold. In fact, she feels that this price is low. A slightly medium-sized surgery in the United States has the lowest price. The cost of medical operations when her arm was broken costed tens of thousands of meters. Compared to these, she feels so lucky to be able to buy this for 10,000 meters. When the girl's price of 150,000 meters gold was spit out, everyone in the audience looked at Eno. Obviously, this price is an acceptable price for them. But it is Eno who sets the price, not them. Looking at the crowd at his feet, Eno shook his head gently. Then turned around, looked at the crowd and asked, here, a family's medical insurance needs more than 10,000 meters of gold for 1 year. A slight operation requires tens of thousands of meters of gold, let alone medium or large operations. But just when they thought that Eno needed to increase the price by more than 150,000 meters, Eno said slowly, now I announce. The price of fingers and toes is 17 meters. The price of palm and sole is 37 meters. The price of arms and thighs is 97 meters. They will be sold on the Umbrella's official website after 2 tonight. And as the first person to experience the latest equipment of the Umbrella, Eno turned around and gestured to the girl next to her and said, she will get this set of equipment for free, and its number is 00. Time and space seemed to be frozen. At this time, you can only hear the sound of the fountain at the huge New York Expo. After a while, wow, a strong astonishment broke out instantly under the platform. Everyone's thoughts are, the most expensive equipment is only 100,000 meters worth of gold. Are you kidding? A middle-class person's annual income is enough to buy one. Such high-tech equipment is the most expensive. As long as you save the province, you can buy nano-neurobiomechanical limbs. Look, this name, this specification, this technology, this little money. Even the girl next to Eno, she looked at her right hand, how rare this set of equipment was, numbered 002. Looking at the louder and louder voices under the stage, Eno's left hand stretched out his index finger and pressed it under the open right palm. Seeing Eno's mute gesture, the crowd under the platform slowly quieted down. Eno swept around and said, I know, even at this price, there are still many people who can't afford this equipment. Because they are also discriminated against by society while they are disabled, which in the end makes it more difficult for property income. So, Eno looked at the crowd and said solemnly, Umbrella Company launches installment payment function. As the name suggests, you only need to provide proof of work and identity, and you can pay a down payment of 20% to take this set of equipment and go to normal people's daily life. After that, you only need a fixed monthly repayment plus a small installment interest. Umbrella launched this function now in 201, and the installment payment is even in the concept of country to country. Even credit cards for overdraft consumption are just being promoted by banks and countries. At this time, their concept is still at the point where the products of large companies are as much as they are. Why do big installment companies want to install installments? Now there are installments. What do you like to buy or not? I sell. As for whether someone will escape the money, rest assured, first of all, the Umbrella can't send a Red Umbrella member to catch you for the cost of 200 meters of gold. But the Umbrella will give all your information to the National Public Security Department. Then congratulations, you are a fugitive. And it will go through 310 years of prison and finally bear the whole person's background without any credibility and qualifications. In other words, if you have spent your entire life, delete your account and try again. Don't doubt that the umbrella can't do it, it's the lightest. As soon as Eno finished speaking, reporters raised their hands. Eno first let the girl go down and rest first, then raised his hand to beckon the reporter to ask. The female reporter stood up and asked, "Mr. Eno, will your proposal of installment payment in this way make the return of funds too slow? Although it has interest, the cost of biomechanical limbs is also very high. Wouldn't it be difficult for the company to delay the recovery of funds for so long? Cost. The gold is less than the cost, and talk to me about the cost. I'm afraid that you died on the spot." Eno lightly coughed his throat and said, "First of all, the umbrella company does not lack funds. Even if it is slower to return to the basket, it doesn't matter. On the contrary, I think that people with physical disabilities need this equipment more, so why don't I sell them the equipment they will buy sooner?" Speaking of this, Eno is self-deprecating. S.H.I.E.L.D said with a chuckle. "In fact, we are only to make money, but we earn more conscience. With the current pharmaceutical industry and medical instrument market situation, if we do not make a breakthrough, the market is close to saturation. Although the umbrella company does not lack funds, it also needs to move forward. So we are working hard on breaking through technology to benefit society while making profits." These words are indeed true. We make conscience money. As for this profit multiple, the cost is so low, the amount of money sold is actually determined by the marketing department after a lot of calculations. This price, it will neither destroy the market, nor feel cheap, and it will not make people unable to afford it. There is nothing more, the price is more appropriate. So the cost is here, and how much money should be made. The female reporter heard Eno's words. She bowed to Eno first, then took the microphone and said, "No wonder the World Health Organization selects you as the cover character and respects you very much every year. Let's not talk about the people who don't use it, but you deserve the respect of everyone who uses your product. I am here first to thank you on behalf of them." Seeing her bowing earnestly, Eno waved his hand to indicate that it was okay. "As for the World Health Organization, I can introduce it first. It is to promote the prevention and treatment of epidemics and endemic diseases, and to provide and improve the teaching and training of public health disease medical treatment and related matters. Of course, there is also the right to promote the determination of international standards for biological products. The umbrella company has a close relationship with this organization, because medicines or medical instruments or hygiene and biology are all related to them. Coupled with the reputation of the umbrella, the relationship between the two organizations is okay. In the past, the former Director General even recommended Eno to serve as the Director General. But Eno hinted that he refused. Not only the former Director General, but also the national government have come to talk to him. But they all just want to get some benefits. And if you want to be the Director General of the World Health Organization, you must be supported by a permanent member. And being supported is equivalent to joining. How could Eno agree? And there is not much benefit, just more affairs. After the female reporter sat down, another reporter raised his hand. Eno raised his hand to signal that he could speak. She stood up and asked, "You have shown us the latest future, and you have also shown us a safer and more secure future. Then what kind of cutting-edge technology will umbrella biology study? Can you disclose some unimportant little news?" Here, no one does not care about the safety of their lives. Whether it is medicine or medical equipment umbrellas, they have been pushed one after another. But that, compared to this biological manipulator, it is a small thing that is not important. What they want to see now is whether the umbrella will launch more advanced biotech products. After the reporter finished speaking, he immediately got the approval of all reporters. Obviously they all want to know the news. First, this is the last question. Eno first said in advance. Secondly, about the latest umbrella biotechnology, I can indeed reveal a little. It will be related to all people in the world, and everyone can use it. It will be jointly developed by our newest core members, Dr. Hailun Zhao and Dr. Angela. With it, each of us will have a healthier, stronger, and more powerful body. Wow! In an instant, there was another noise under Eno's podium. If the nano-neuro-biomechanical limbs are only for the benefit of some people's technology. The technology that Eno just mentioned is, everyone in the world can participate. And what did he say is healthier, stronger, more powerful? What does this mean? There is no doubt about the body. Mr. Eno, I still want to ask. Mr. Eno, may I ask if this is? Mr. Eno, this is the gene. Without waiting for them to respond, Eno directly transferred. Speaking of the last question, that is the last question. After seeing Eno go, they swarmed up under the steps of the podium and desperately raised the microphone in their hands, hoping that Eno could say a few more words. They want to hear even 2 words. But for sure. They kept looking at Eno's back until he disappeared in the direction of the lounge on the side, and there was no sign of Eno turning back. Come to the lounge. Tony stepped forward, patted Eno's chest and said, yes, I'll catch up soon. Eno looked at the narcissist speechlessly. You should care about your body first. During this period of time, the cover girl probably escaped. Hey, how could it be? Tony refused. I have already sworn to Pepper, I will never touch those. 2 messy girls, of course I have to wait until I can live until then. Eno looked at Tony magically. This guy could actually swear that Tony looked at his distrustful eyes, and put his arms around Eno's shoulders and walked out. Then he took advantage of the time Angela and Zhao Hailun were following up and said. Pepper said that Angela picked the girls for you. Zhao Hailun is a genius and beautiful. He has a different taste from Angela. She picked them for you, right? Of course. I don't have that unpleasant meaning. I'm just curious if what Little Chili said is right, to verify it. I swore to Little Pepper, if you really are like this, then I can do that too. Angela also said this to Pepper. Eno turned his head slightly and looked at Angela, who followed behind and looked at himself inexplicably. Then he turned his head and said to Tony, then you may have to keep your promise, Angela is right. Forgive me, Helen, I just helped this dude turn his head back. Besides, Eno is indeed a fact. That's right, nothing wrong. Helen was. Angela picked it up. Hearing Eno's words, Tony's eyes widened in an instant. He looked at Eno suddenly and looked back at Angela again. Then he quietly gave Eno a thumbs up on the abdomen that they blocked. Eno humbly pressed Tony's thumb back. Basic operation, basic operation. As soon as I walked into the lounge of this New York Expo. The 2 came to the bar and leaned back. Tony took a glass of wine and handed it to Eno. He also held a glass of wine and said, I don't know why I am dying so happy. Eno shrugged while drinking a sip. Who knows, maybe your brain is sick. Tony gave a drink to his mouth. You have a problem, that is, speaking is too simple and honest. No, this is good quality. Eno retorted. At this time, Tony's bodyguard, Harpy, found him. Eno looked at this chubby bodyguard. His name was Hogan. He is wearing a bodyguard suit, which may seem useless. But he was the first group of people to follow Tony, and he was also the group that Tony trusted the most. Harpy can die for Tony. Hello, Mr. Eno. Happy came up to say hello. Hello. Eno nodded at him. After greeting, Harpy said to Tony, Miss Pepper is here, and she also brought someone with a special identity. Quote, quote. Tony looked at Harpy with a question mark on his face. Isn't Pepper in the company? Why did you come over? And who is the special person? After a while, Pepper in a formal dress led a woman in a purple hip skirt over. After Pepper led the woman here, he went to chat with Angela and Zhao Hailun. Even Harpy walked away. When they are gone, only Tony and Eno are left leaning on the bar. Of course, there is also the woman with a hip skirt in front of them. She came to the 2 of them and smiled and said to Tony, Hello, Mr. Tony Stark. Eno and Tony looked at each other, and Tony shook his hand first. The skin feels a bit rough. Tony made a speech in Eno's ear as soon as he finished holding it. But Tony's voice is not small at all. This woman must be able to hear it. After shaking hands with Tony, the woman stretched out another clean hand to Eno and said, Hello, Mr. Eno, my name is Benny. And many more. Tony interrupted in time. He touched his chin with one hand and looked curiously at Benny and asked, Why do you use you for him and you use you for me? Why don't you introduce yourself to me but introduce yourself to him? Of course it's not jealous, I just want to ask what is the difference between the 2 of me. After Benny and Eno shook hands, they looked at Tony with a smile and said, Is there any? Quote, quote. Tony regretted not having a recorder. He looked at Eno and asked for help. She said that just now, right? Talk about business. Obviously Eno doesn't want to care about this child, in his 30s. Hearing Eno talking about business, Benny took out a subpoena from her bag and turned to look at Tony and said, "I am the executive officer of the Senate Armed Services Committee, you." Hearing this, Eno turned around and left with the wine glass. "This is a conversation that has risen to the national level. It's better to treat him as if I didn't know, I didn't hear or see anything. When the time comes, there will be a lot of trouble." But before Eno took 2 steps, Benny, who had just spoken to Tony, interrupted, "Please wait, Mr. Eno, here is your subpoena." Eno turned around, looked at the woman and said, "Mine." "Correct." The woman nodded. Eno turned around, returned to Tony and leaned against the bar. The woman took out a subpoena from her bag and handed it to Eno to explain. "Actually, it is a subpoena, but it can also be said to invite you to join the Senate Armed Services Committee." "What about me?" Tony looked at the woman and said, "Am I inviting too?" "You are a subpoena, order." The woman relentlessly explained to Tony again. "Tony, why is the gap between people so big? Aren't we all 3-legged men?" This woman doesn't care about it. "Tony," she looked directly into Eno's eyes softly and said, "Tomorrow at 9 o'clock, Washington must be on time." Eno drank the wine and expressed understanding for her to lightly lift the glass. "Can I see your police badge?" Tony looks at this woman executive officer, he wants to see the ID. Hearing Tony's words, the woman took out the police badge, which resembled Captain America's shield. After confirming, Tony also nodded. After the mission was over, the woman Benny nodded to Eno, and then left with her shoulder bag on her back. Tony looked at her twisting back and said, "You know." "Do not know." Eno drank the wine in the glass, picked up the bottle from the side and refilled it. "Then why is she so good to you?" Tony turned his head directly to question. "Eno, have it." Eno said something that seemed to have been heard somewhere. The discouraged Tony took Eno's wine glass and filled his own glass. "During the period, I still babbled, 'Why are you so good to you? What's wrong with me?'" Looking at Tony, who was sulking like a child, Eno decided to anger him again. Eno looked at the wine glass and said softly, like counting. "Young, rich, good reputation, dedicated, good for women, good for everything." Seeing the death ray as Tony turned his head, Eno shrugged at him. It was originally. At this time, Angela and Zhao Hailun both walked up after seeing the government's lawman leaving. "And Pepper and Harpy." Angela stepped forward, looked at Pepper inexplicably, and took Eno's wrist. Zhao Hailun looked aside, and walked forward to take Eno's other hand. Eno looked at them, and after a while, "I have no hands to drink." Angela was taken aback, and suddenly found that Eno's right hand was still holding a wine glass. She reached out and took Eno over the glass. "I'll hold it for you." The result hasn't waited for Eno to say anything. Pepper took the phone and asked next to him, "I took it." Angela nodded. Click. "It's done." Neil. After the operation that didn't understand, Pepper pressed the button on the phone and said to Angela, "I sent it to you." With this time, Angela leaned into Eno's ear and said softly, "Go back and say." Eno raised the left hand with Helen's hand and looked at his watch. 2. "Okay, it's so late, it's almost 11 o'clock when I get home. And tomorrow, I will take a private jet to the Senate Armed Services Committee in Washington." Eno looked at Tony and said, "I'll be here today, we will go back first, and we will go to Washington tomorrow." Tony suddenly reacted and looked at his watch. "It's all this point, then let's go too." Eno nodded and led Angela and Zhao Hailun before leaving. "But it hasn't gone far." Tony's distant voice came, "Don't be late." Eno didn't catch him and left without looking back. People who are more than 1 minute late to the party are here to remind people who are not late. Get in a safety car with an umbrella. The entire convoy began to drive back to Harmonton in New York. Eno 3 sits in a soundproof protective car at the front and rear. He clasped Angela and Helen's shoulders and asked curiously, "What did you say to Pepper? Why do you want to take a photo?" He looked at Helen, and Helen blushed and turned to look at the window. Reluctantly, he turned his head again and looked at Angela. Angela leaned her head on Eno's shoulder. "It's because I did it, but Pepper hasn't done it yet, so she wants to take a photo to commemorate it." "Do it." Eno questioned. "What to do?" Angela quietly raised her hand and pointed at Helen, who was still looking at the window. But I don't know that after hearing this, Helen has seen Angela pointing at herself in the reflection of the window. All of a sudden, her face became even more red, and it went down to her ears. The next day, Eno opened his eyes in Angela's jade arms and neck. Taking her arm away, Eno got up and started daily washing and picked up the phone by the way to call Jason. Jason, is the private jet ready? Jason, ready, you can leave when you arrive. Hang up the phone. Eno put the phone away. Today, there is no need to ask Angela to get up, she can sleep well. Because this time there is no need for many military committee personnel to go to Washington, as long as you bring one. Then Angela, who was tossed for a long time last night, temporarily decided to let Zhao Hailun go with her. And she said she wanted to sleep in. Come to the living room. Zhao Hailun is waiting for him. Let's go, Eno said. Zhao Hailun nodded. The two left the villa, and Zhao Hailun drove Eno to the airport. Arriving at the airport, after Red Umbrella drove the car away, Eno and Zhao Hailun boarded a private jet. On the plane, Zhao Hailun still pestered Eno to tell her the story that she hadn't finished before. After 2 hours, the private jet flew to the airport in Washington. Zhao Hailun drove the vehicle that was already prepared and Eno finished the military committee hall. On the road, Zhao Hailun asked curiously, "What does the military commission invite you to do as a guest?" Eno put one hand on the car door with the window closed, blowing the wind, say a few words as a neutral person. They said it nicely, and after that, just say something fair. But then it's not that I want to play word games to make things happen, as they think. Zhao Hailun nodded in understanding. The political circle is really bad. That's right, the political circle is really bad. After driving for half an hour, the two arrived outside the Senate Hall. As a result, as soon as he arrived at the entrance of the hall, Eno saw something magical. Tony, you are not late. On a silver supercar, Tony lay on the cushions with sunglasses, ignoring the high sun. Hearing Eno's words, Tony silently rubbed his hazy eyes and hit H. I didn't even return home last night, and Pepper asked me to come to China overnight. Then I found a hotel and fell asleep. Pepper, who was called by her name, looked over, and she promised, "This is the military committee of the Senate. I'm afraid he will be late again, so I asked him to come early." Yes, this trick is seconds. At this moment, the clock on the triangular hall of the Senate rang. It's 9 o'clock. Tony dragged his tired body to open the car door. We went in first, quickly settle this meeting and then go back to sleep. After Tony and Pepper walked in, Eno and Helen also walked in. But the difference is that Tony went straight to the hall. On the other hand, Eno took Helen to the lounge first, where he could also watch the progress of the meeting through broadcast. Because I am an invited guest, not ordered. So Eno only needs to wait in the lounge until he needs himself inside before leaving. Along the way, many officials and a few parliamentarians also walked in. They both nodded their greetings to each other. After the court session, in the entire hall, except for the seats of the councillors, there are only three seats in front of the invited people. Tony, who was ordered this time, sits in the middle. But both sides of him are empty. Several reporters with long guns and short guns squatted between the two tables to broadcast and film in real time. During the meeting, Tony had been annoyed by the Hydra member Senator Stern and turned his head to talk to Pepper. He has always been wrangling with Tony in political discourse. At this moment, Tony wished to talk to Eno. Still others speak straightforwardly. "Mr. Stark, we haven't finished the topic just now. Mr. Stark, can you turn back?" At this time, Senator Stern once again reminded Tony, who had turned to talk to Pepper. "Oh, no problem." Tony turned his head halfway. "Can you concentrate on listening to the words?" "No problem." Tony still half turned his head. Stern slowly rubbed his hands and said, "Do you have a special weapon?" Tony turned around and said into the microphone, "I don't have one." "You have not." "I do not have." Tony was sure, but he added, "It depends on what you think is a weapon." Stern, the Iron Man at the New York Expo yesterday was considered a weapon. What I invented is not a weapon, and I don't even make a weapon. Tony explained clearly, "I didn't even make weapons, just think of him as armor." But Stern did not let go, and asked again, "Then how do you describe Iron Man?" "What it is as a senator." "Then what is it?" Tony thought for a while, but because of time constraints, he said directly, the same as yesterday's umbrella prosthesis, they are all high-tech prostheses, but my function may be more comprehensive. Ha ha ha. As soon as Tony finished speaking, the observers at the back laughed. Tony turned his head to look at them. Isn't what I said is wrong? It can also make physically disabled people move. I don't think there is any problem in saying this. This is the best name I can think of. Stern said directly. It's a weapon, it's not a prosthesis. No, no, no. Tony refused. If you treat it as a benefit to society. It's the weapon, Mr. Stark. Senator Stern interrupted Tony directly. It is better to give this weapon to the American people. Don't even think about it. Tony also severely interrupted the congressman. He said, I am Iron Man. I am integrated with the steel armor. It is my skin and my organs. Handing over it is. I am taking out my organs by laparotomy. That would be a forced sale of silver or labor, Senator. Ha 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 ha. The auditors in the hall laughed again. Now only Tony dared to speak like this without fear in this hall. Pepper sitting behind Tony covered his forehead with his hand. Tony can say that even here. It's really him. At last. Tony summed up a sentence. I can't give it to you, either way. I don't understand. I am not an expert, but I know an expert. Senator Stern straightened his tie and said, not only him, I also invited experts in prosthetic technology. He can also determine whether your steel armor is a weapon. Now summon Justin Hammer, the main arms dealer of the Ministry of Defense, and invite Mr. Eno, the largest biopharmaceutical company in the world, to come to the hall for debate. Wow. Discussions arose in the hall for an instant. Senator Stern's first sentence may not matter. But the second sentence of Eno is very important to them. People who just put the world's most advanced biomechanical prosthesis on sale yesterday will actually be here. Shouldn't he be busy? He will give face to come here with the noise. Eno leads Zhao Hailun to Tony's right and sits down, while Zhao Hailun stays quietly behind Eno's right. Seeing that Eno finally sits over, Tony directly lifted the chair up and walked to Eno before putting it down after everyone was shocked. Then he sat down beside Eno. At last he suddenly remembered something. He then stood up and went to the original position and took the microphone over and placed it next to Eno. But just when Tony grabbed Eno's shoulders, Stern said anxiously, don't get close to the notary, you're bad behavior. Does it legally say that, Senator Stern? Tony put his arms around Eno's shoulders in front of him. No matter where I am, the relationship with Eno is invincible. Is there a problem? Click, click, click. The sound of the camera shutter sounded in many places. The reporters are all taking pictures frantically. This is the first time that Tony and Eno have announced that their relationship is so good in public. Well, Senator Stern really doesn't know about this. He thought that with Tony's character, the two company expos would be invisible competition. And Eno was at the fair last night. The relationship between the two should be similar to that of Justin Hammer. But now these things can't be managed. He looked at Hammer, who walked in, and said, anyway, let's first invite Mr. Hammer, an expert in weapons, to sit down. Tony watched Hanmo, who was wearing a gray-white dress, stepped forward and took the microphone and said, I'm sorry, with all due respect, I haven't seen any weapon experts. Where is he? Ha ha ha. Hammer laughed at himself and took the microphone. I am not an expert, you are, Tony, you are a genius. Congressman Stern, I have a question to ask everyone. Hammer took the microphone and stood up and said, maybe I am not an expert, but do you know who is the real expert? Speaking of this, Hammer pointed at Tony fiercely and said, it's your father. Howard Stark. He is not only our patriarch, but also the father of military industry. They are not performers, they are real beasts. Everyone knows why we are here. In the past 6 months, Tony Stark has built a sharp sword. But he insists that it is a shield. He wants us to trust him. He wants us to hide behind him. Hammer made strange gestures while talking. I really hope that we are all safe. I really hope that. I also hope that I don't have to lock the door when I go out, but... Did you watch the Hulk in the first 2 months? Can he play Iron Man? He can't beat it. Did you see the gods of the last few weeks? Did he deal with Iron Man? Totally impossible. This is not heaven. We live in a world full of dangers. Mr. Stark may not be able to predict the dangers. Speaking of this, he looked at the people watching in the live camera and said, "Thank you, God bless Iron Man, God bless the United States." A passage from Hammer, although it does not say that Iron Man is a weapon. But he compared Iron Man with Hulk, the gods. Then Iron Man becomes a weapon directly. It directly becomes the default. If everyone agrees with him, it is that Iron Man is a weapon by default. Tony reached for the microphone. Seeing Hammer finished speaking, Stern directly interrupted Tony's attempt to speak into the microphone and said, "Now, Mr. Eno, please comment. What do you think of Iron Man? Do you agree with what Justin Hammer said just now?" Tony paused while holding the microphone. Then change it to help Eno take the microphone and hand it to Eno. If Stern invites someone to speak, Tony interrupts directly. "I just want to say." Eno turned into the microphone, looking at the strange yin and yang. Hanmo said, "Although I don't know what you are discussing. But speaking, it seems that you don't need to stand up, and you don't need to dance and make strange poses. Are you the kind of silver seller Tony just said? Happiness. Ha 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 ha." Eno just finished talking. Tony clapped wildly beside him, and his applause resounded through the hall through the microphone. A roar of laughter also sounded directly in the hall. Justin Hammer suddenly returned to his seat awkwardly and sat down. "Please tell me the key thing, Mr. Eno," Senator Stern reminded. "No problem." Eno nodded. He held the microphone in his right hand, embraced with one hand, and then leaned on the chair with Erlang's leg up. "Then let's not talk about weapons or weapons. I'm not an expert in this aspect, and I don't know. But I am aware of biological matters, and I am an expert in this area. Then, let's get rid of the concept of weapons, let's talk about it first, and analyze what Mr. Hammer said just now." Seeing Eno holding the microphone with one hand, Tony was afraid that he would affect his performance, so he took it over and helped Eno hold it. "Well, it's a good idea." Eno changed to embrace with both hands. "First, you brought up the Hulk incident at Corvo College 2 months ago. That incident was also my personal experience. I believe I know the situation better than anyone else. At that time, Hulk was ordered by General Ross, who is now in jail, to use tear gas to force that Hulk out, which caused an armed conflict. But before that, it was all Rose's initiative. I believe you have also heard about it in the news. But did Hulk kill people? He didn't. Instead, he saved some people from the Harlem Street incident a few weeks ago. He fought hatred. From this, I want to ask everyone, is he a bad guy?" Speaking of this, Eno turned and looked at the crowd behind him. They saw Eno turned his head and shook his head together. "Well, isn't it?" Eno turned his head and glanced at Hammer and continued, "Secondly, at the same time, at the same place, the same incident occurred in the case of the gods. This time I believe you don't need to tell me, you know. Come on, tell me out loud. God, yes, bad, people. Audience, no." During the live broadcast on all platforms, dozens of people behind Eno shouted neatly. Among them, he might as well be in a high position. But still shouting, "No," affirmative sentence. Hearing the support of the crowd behind him, Eno looked at Justin Hammer again and said, "Now, I want to ask you, Iron Man protects the people, Hulk protects the people, and the gods also protect the people. But why did you turn into war? Weapons, killing, bad, adjectives. They did this, what are you doing? Do you just fart with both mouths open?" Tony closed the arms manufacturing department of the family business for the sake of conscience. "What about you?" "Oh, right," Eno reacted. He turned his head and shrugged towards the crowd behind him. "He is an arms dealer who sells weapons. He must only know this." Ha 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 ha. The flip of this moment made everyone laugh. Yup, what is Hulk doing to hate? What is Iron Man doing to clean up terrorist organizations? God was doing everything that day. And just what Justin Hammer is doing. He is an arms dealer who sells weapons, whether it is the government or foreign countries, he sells them. Do you want such a person to decide something? That's what it means. Happiness. Tony's happy palms turned red and turned directly into a ruthless weapon. This must be the happiest day for him. It's cooler than playing Time magazine's cover. Justin Hammer immediately picked up the microphone when he heard it, but Senator Stern said directly, "What you said has nothing to do with whether or not Iron Man is a weapon. What we need is for you to talk about Iron Man's non-lethal power and the possibility of harming the people from an objective point of view. But in this case, we don't want to delay any longer. Let's just watch the Iron Man fake video we collected. After Stern finished speaking, the live camera turned directly to Tony's left, the big screen in front of Hammer. A video was opened above. In a relatively deserted area, on a platform, you can see a robot-like figure moving. After seeing it, Tony frowned and took out an electronic light screen directly from his arms. Call for high-tech products. Eno embraced his arms and just turned his head to see. Tony operated the light screen while pressing it and said, "So what, the company that encounters the internal network disconnection of your umbrella is Burning Stick." After speaking, he took the light screen and pointed it at the big TV and live broadcast machine a few times. Yes, no matter how powerful a hacker is, you also need to be online, and no matter how powerful an electronic is, you also need electricity. Both of these are gone, and the most powerful technique is also a fire stick. Ultron is out of the internet, or is it Ultron? Funny, it should be thankful that the Earth is not that, the age of steam. After Tony clicked on the light screen, his home computer immediately connected to the broadcast channel to invade. Let you see what the facts are. After a while, the code flashed directly on the big screen. What is he doing? Congressman Stern looked at the scene where Tony was empty with a few clicks. However, the intrusion has been successful on the big screen and live broadcast machine. Zoom into the lens. The original Iron Man figure was actually a clunky and funny broken machine. After walking a few steps, it fell directly to the ground, the control system was directly out of control, and its hands and feet jumped wildly. In the end, even the weapon system got out of control. The two Gatlings with both hands directly fired around, killing several people around. Then another video screen was changed. Justin Hammer stood in a tent. A particularly heavy robot is being tested in front of him. And there are a lot of wires connected to this robot. Justin Hammer said as he moved in the video, "Lift your foot." The robot also lifted its foot. Justin Hammer said again, "Turn around, follow me like this." Seeing this, the scene, the Justin Hammer finally couldn't help it. He rushed to hurriedly wanted to unplug the large screen wire, and then he hurriedly searched for a long time. Buzz. Ah. The driver's scream accompanied by the machine's startup sound. Although the machine turned, but he turned 180 degrees from the front to the back. The driver inside turned directly into a dead person who looked at the top half of the back and the bottom half looked at the front. Finally, the video is almost done, and Justin Hammer also unplugged it. Tony watched the video and said, "This is called Iron Man. I said that it will take at least 10 years for the country to do it, and Hammer Industries will take at least 20 years. Mr. Justin Hammer, you are on TV. Is this the threat and the danger? You are the danger, right?" After speaking, Tony leaned into Eno's ear and said, "You are right, he really needs to cooperate with the action when he speaks, and that, also in the video." After Justin Hammer unplugged the large screen cable, Tony's video was cut off, and he picked up the microphone to make sure of one thing first. First of all, that, the driver is not dead. And many more. Tony interrupted Hammer's words directly. That, the person who rotates 80 degrees inside is okay. What's the matter with him? I don't need you to answer, we have experts. Tony turned his head and raised the microphone, seriously. Mr. Eno, can you still live if you rotate 180 degrees up and down? Can you save it even if you are alive? Looking at Tony, Eno cooperated with the performance and said, "The chance of death is very high. Even if you survive by luck, you will definitely be paralyzed for half your life. Maybe putting our nerve control device on the waist can solve the leg problem, but it can't solve the butt problem." Okay, thank you Mr. Eno for the answer. After Tony finished speaking, he put the microphone on the table and stood up. See if they have any use, they can only create threats. And I, Tony Stark, Iron Man, will be the same as Eno just said, I will protect the people like the gods, and we will maintain world peace like the gods. We are safe, we have Iron Man, and the gods. What do you want from me? Tony said, raising his hand to signal Senator Stern and said, I tried to cooperate with these jumping clowns, but they wanted me to hand over myself, this is impossible. You, Mr. Stark, Stern exploded directly. Looking at the noisy hall, Eno sits quietly on a chair as a son. At this time, Zhao Hailun, who was quiet behind Eno's right, leaned into Eno's ear and whispered quietly, "Brother Tianqian, you have protected the people and world peace." "I am not, don't talk nonsense." Eno stretched out his hand and squeezed Helen's cheek with a fierce expression. "Like a big bad wolf said, but the condition is to eat you." Helen was taken aback for a moment, and didn't know what she had thought of. His face flushed and sat back. Maybe she thought of eating a little differently. At this moment, Tony walked back, he shook hands with Eno, and then pulled him up. He put his arms around his shoulders and said to the live broadcast, "Listen well, my current dream is the same as that of an umbrella company. I will also develop in the direction of benefiting society. And the umbrella, Eno, is also my best friend. I use my fund to serve the people, and you all know the umbrella, so I don't need to explain it. But one thing you can confirm is, you can absolutely trust Umbrella and Stark." At this point, Tony took off the sunglasses and put them on Eno's eyes. The two walked out directly. Obviously Tony, the Senate Armed Services Committee, has achieved great success this time. Tony and Eno directly tied the concept of weapons to the people. And Tony Whitty tied himself to the gods. With the support of Tenjin's fans, he merged with some of his fans to resist government forces. In this way, the government's oppression can be easily and directly dismantled. Take Shanghai Lun out of the Senate. Tony sat on his sports car and said, "Eno, do you want to visit our company tomorrow? We can also talk about other technologies." Eno thought for a while and made a gesture. "No problem." A few hours later, after getting off the private jet, Eno and Helen returned to the Umbrella building. Top office. Angela held a copy of the data and said next to Eno, "After 24 o'clock yesterday, all the biomechanical prosthetic limbs on the official website were all sold out in an instant. Excluding pre-orders, we will make a total of about 13.6 billion meters of gold, but we will pay taxes." The tax payment is indeed. But there are ways to avoid taxes. Eno waved his hand. "Let the accounting department avoid taxes reasonably and do all the money for the charity." Angela nodded, still the same. There are many ways to avoid taxes, but Eno chose charity. Of course, Tony too. For example, if the umbrella is to pay 30 billion meters of tax. Then, after Eno has done 10 billion charity, he only needs to pay 100 tax. Well, doing charity can save money while doing charity. No rich man does not do it. Angela opened another document and said, "The front desk has also submitted a list of appointments. Approximately more than 100 qualified people are making appointments. Eno, let the front desk refuse all, the umbrella does not cooperate." Angela nodded. "See you, Vice President Rodriguez. His daughter has broken a left leg. Now he may want to customize a special gift for her daughter." Eno thought for a while. "Let him come in the afternoon the day after tomorrow, and I will go to Tony to play tomorrow." Angela was taken aback, but thinking of the situation in the live broadcast just now, she understood. She put away the information, and there are so many things to report today. And it's because Helen took the temporary post after Eno left. At this moment, Zhao Hailun walked out of the elevator in the underground laboratory. She walked quickly next to Eno with joy and said, "I have ideas for sub-health drugs." As soon as these words came out, both Eno and Angela looked at her with interest. Zhao Hailun said, "Among the medicines produced by our umbrella, no, it is among the medicines produced all over the world. When people eat it, the efficiency and effect that really work is only minimal. Most of the efficiency is just to assist the human body to dilute and get the effect. But from this idea, we can also use the body's own functions to adjust our physical conditions. The human body has full potential, and if it is used properly, it can always be in a healthy state. In this way, we only need drug assistance instead of the previous thinking to strengthen the body." After listening, Angela nodded in understanding, but it's difficult. After a person takes a drug, it is difficult to determine the absorption efficiency of each person. If there is too much assistance, it will load the demolition man body function. If there is less assistance, it will be no different from the fake drugs on the market. Zhao Hailun nodded in agreement. "It's really hard, but it's better than strengthening the human body. That is luck." And now, we only need to analyze Hulk's blood, observe his functioning formula, and imitate it. In the end, Zhao Hailun's debate won Angela's consent. They turned their heads and looked at Eno together. After all, they all agreed, and in the end they still have to agree with Eno. Eno thought for a while. It seems that there is no need to take body-strengthening medicines. The people just need to be healthy. Why do they want to be strong to protest, march, and rob to create beautiful scenery? And like Helen's supplementary body function and health medicine, it is in line with the method of regulating human body functions that I said at the beginning. Finally, Eno determined, you can use Helen's method. Just do it. Angela is more experienced in primary biology. She will assist you in observing human body functions. Yi Zhao Hailun happily raised his hands and ran to Eno. Sneak attack. After Eno, she went back happily like the wind, pulling Angela and ran into the elevator of the underground laboratory. Before the customs, she blushed slightly to give Eno a steady flight. Next day, the main gate of the Umbrella building is a few kilometers away. A strange thing happened in Stark Industrial Zone. Sister Pepper, the new president, is actually waiting at the gate for who is this who can make the newcomer come out to greet, but just when the crowds come and go are suspicious. Angela drove a red supercar to the door of Stark and was about to drive back to the Umbrella building. Because she has been busy recently, and she has to assist Zhao Hailun in completing sub-health drugs. Pepper greeted Eno at the door, looking at Angela who was about to leave, and asked, won't Angela come in and sit down? Haven't you been to Stark Industrial Park? I still have things to do. Angela declined gently. That's a shame, come back when I have time. Pepper waved to Angela. Come back when I have time. Angela nodded and looked at Eno. I'm leaving now, call me and then pick you up. Eno nodded, and Angela drove away. Pepper turned to look at Eno and the people coming and going around. There are a lot of people here, let's go to the top floor. Suddenly, a familiar voice came. Hi Eno, you are finally here. Eno turned his head, and Tony walked over with a pair of boxing gloves and a black coat and short pants. He kept his sweat and came to Eno, trying to hold his shoulders. Why are you here now? Didn't you say that you were today? Sweat all over and go to the side. Eno quickly avoided the smelly body. Also, it is also today. I will come later to prevent you from getting up. Tony looks sad, nodded. Good idea. With Tony, he entered the Stark Industrial Building. His office is on the top floor, and the place where he exercises is on the penultimate floor of the top floor. After the Trio 3 came to the lounge on the penultimate floor, Tony's bodyguard Hogan was also here. He wears thick armor. There is also a layer of sweat on the neckline of the shirt. It seems that Tony was practicing with him. After the two were on separate sofas, Pepper turned and left to prepare something. Tony picked up the water on the table between Eno and opened the lid and said, after my thoughts, I think it's better to replenish the body or exercise. I think you think taking medicine is humiliating. Certainly. Eno leaned on the sofa. The best way to supplement calcium is to bask in the sun, and it's best to exercise more for health. It's best to drink water with plain water. This is the way it is. Medicines are nothing more than things that people can recover after not paying attention. That's it. After listening to Tony, he became meditative, not knowing what he was thinking about. At this time, Pepper came over with the prepared coffee and desserts. Slow use. Thanks. After putting these on the table, she walked to the sofa next to Tony and sat down. Suddenly, Tony raised his head suddenly and looked at Eno. Would you like to watch the first car race in Monaco where the sun is just right? We can still travel by the way. Quote. For a long time, you were thinking that Tony saw Eno not talking. He turned his back to Pepper and raised his hands towards Eno in a gesture of holding the steering wheel. Well, he didn't want to watch the car, he wanted to drag the car. But before Tony's action was finished, Pepper asked incredible behind him, why do you still have time to travel when the company is so busy? Tony turned his head to look at Pepper. Aren't the Stark shares have a limit of several editions? Why can't the stocks not fall? Pepper held his forehead in distress. This is not a stock issue, this is a management issue. Tony turned back to look at Eno. What do you think? Seeing that even Pepper came to ask for answers, Eno shrugged and picked up a cup of coffee. I'll come again after I finish my official business. Quote. Tony turned back again and looked at Pepper affectionately. I forgot, you are now the president, you should do it. At this time, Pepper wanted to kill Tony. Well, cut it off. Tony is going to Monaco, and Pepper is sure to go too. So whoever handles the affairs has a relationship. Eno looks at Hogan, who is resting in the ring. Tony notices and says, would you like to see how I am connected recently? Eno drank coffee and nodded. What did you practice? Mixed martial arts. Tony stood up and walked towards the ring. Bang bang bang. Bang bang bang. Then it was obvious Hogan that made Tony's blow sound. Pepper said with a little embarrassment. Except for that suit of armor, he has been hot for 3 minutes. This one will be thrown away after playing for a few days at most. Almost. Just as Tony was performing on the ring, suddenly a figure came over. She is dressed in the standard dress of an urban female white-collar worker, with light makeup, and big red wavy hair. This is Natasha. She walked to Pepper, opened a black folder and said, here you need to sign the initials. Pepper glanced at it and signed his name. After finishing the matter, Natasha glanced at Eno secretly, and Eno had already noticed her. Pepper asked curiously after seeing it, you know. Forehead. Eno is organizing language. He can't say that I fired her at the first sight, can I say that, but Natasha would feel that she fired her with a hidden purpose. Finally, I thought about it and said euphemistically. She came to our company to apply for a job, but we were full of positions at the time. Natasha also breathed a sigh of relief when she heard Eno's words. If Tony knew she was being opened in the umbrella, based on the relationship between the two of them, Stark would have opened her too. If that happens, Natasha probably has her mentality. At this time, Tony, who had just finished punching, climbed onto the fence and looked at Natasha and asked, what is your name, miss? You actually know Eno, he is a famous otaku. Romanov. Natasha put away the black folder and said, Natasha Romanov. Tony nodded. Come here, come up on the ring. Pepper watched Tony actually let the woman go to the ring and fight the bodyguard. You. Eno raised his hand and motioned not to speak. Pepper looked at Eno's cue, closed his mouth and fell silent. After seeing Natasha on stage, Tony flipped it down. He was sitting on his sofa, leaning on the armrest with one hand and using the other hand to click on the open tabletop with snacks. With him a little bit, the desktop immediately became a light screen. Tony started investigating the information Natasha could see. Yes, you can see it. Because even Tony can only see S.H.I.E.L.D. The modified data, the real data are all archived, how can it be placed on the internet? She is fluent in French, Italian, and Latin. Flipping through, Tony suddenly motioned to Eno to look over. Turning his head, Eno first saw the picture of Natasha wearing a bikini. Of course there are various model photos. Tony touched his chin when he saw it and said, she's still there, used to be a model in Tokyo. Like it. Eno looked at Tony and joked, the body is pretty good. Tony thought for a while, and turned off the light screen with a snap, quit. Eno immediately gave him a thumbs up. I'm afraid it will come back as soon as your problem is solved. Tony can quit this. He didn't believe in killing Eno. At this moment, bang. After Natasha gave Hogan a hand to throw, Tony saw it. She turned her head and said seriously to Eno, it is true. Pepper looked at Eno in surprise. Did he know that Natasha is so good? That's why he asked her to go up, and Eno noticed Pepper's eyes and explained. Her figure is a figure that often exercises strength. Don't look at her butt, then they are used to drive the leg muscles. Although she is not very tall, but the proportions are very good, plus her shirt is a bit tight, I can vaguely find traces of her exercise. So according to the comprehensive data, she is not necessarily weak or a little woman. After listening, Pepper nodded in admiration. It turned out that he still had this ability. After Tony heard it, he quietly approached Eno and asked in a low voice, I also saw the poisoning the day before yesterday. Eno nodded. At this time, Natasha had arranged her clothes and came to Tony's front, opened another folder and said, I need Mr. Stark's fingerprints. Tony turned his head and pressed Natasha. After finishing the fingerprint, he asked, which department do you belong to? Legal department. Tony nodded. I want you to go to the security department. Natasha's face instantly stiffened. Tony said again, Just kidding, go back if nothing is wrong. Natasha's face returned to normal, closed the folder and moved towards Eno and Tony. Pepper nodded and left. If this is arranged to the security department, maybe her mission will fail again. After seeing Natasha leaving, Tony turned his head to look at Pepper and Hogan and said, "Are you okay? If you are okay, go out and buy milk tea and pizza for me and Eno." Hearing Tony's obvious rushing words, Pepper and Hogan nodded and left one after another. Of course, milk tea and pizza are still available. After seeing them go, Tony turned his head and asked, "I went back to study the nano-neural control device. Is it just to simulate neural electrical signals?" "Of course, otherwise what do you want to do?" Eno picked up a piece of ice cream that was almost melted and said, "It's just a biological manipulator." "Do you still want to capture the brain's nerve consciousness to control the biological manipulator?" "With this technology, I'm still here to do this. I've been doing virtual reality a long time ago. Is that simply crushing the technology of this era? Neural electrical signals and neural meaning recognition are a few words different. But the gap is, one by one. But there is another possibility, and that is to study the method of manifesting the nerve consciousness of the flower of the gods. I am afraid that the virtual reality that captures neuroconsciousness can be brought out." Tony reacted and nodded. "As I thought, I am also developing related technologies for my armor. This way, there will be no situation that I thought about, but I can't react, but I only develop the armor to the size of a suitcase. This situation is normal for individuals. You know what you are going to do when you are playing, but you can't react. When you are playing the game, you see the enemy, but accordingly you still shoot slowly. This is the performance of the movement not keeping up with consciousness. This is critical in battle." Eno nodded. "It should be like this. Fast, convenient, and concentrated is the essence. The future will definitely be nanotechnology. Moreover, under the same combat power, the younger you are, the stronger you are. If a battle armor like you becomes a mecha, I was blasted by my own armor every minute. Happiness." Tony clapped several times in a row. "As I thought, these armors look very fit, but I still feel cumbersome. The real technology in the future should be nanotechnology. Your umbrella is very prescient and has been at the forefront." Chapter 71. Certainly. Eno unceremoniously accepted Tony's admiration. "I also had the foresight to put Angela and Zhao Hailun by my side in advance, before they will surely become famous in the future." Speaking of this, Eno looked at Tony deeply. "Tony, you need to know. It is always the fewest group of people who prop up this world, and speak in the larger direction. There will only be one in charge of this universe." Tony nodded in agreement no matter what, and he was thinking about Eno's words at the same time. To be honest, no matter how Tony is, he is also a mortal. Although he is called a mortal body, comparable to a god. But this will always change. You can't let him suddenly rise from a mortal thought to a higher level of thought. It is difficult to change thinking. If in the original plot, Tony desperately puts on the steel armor of Blue Star, then there will be no subsequent plot. Correct. Tony raised his head. "Are you going to the first car in Monaco?" "You haven't given me an answer yet." Eno. "Go." Tony. "When?" Eno. "The day after tomorrow." "Why the day after tomorrow?" Tony asked impatiently. "Should this be a walk-and-go trip?" "We arrived at night on a private jet." Eno held his head helplessly. "The vice president will come to see me tomorrow. He estimates that he will have to customize a prosthesis. It would not be nice to let him dove like this. Then we will leave tomorrow evening. We will find a pilot from the Great Bear Nation, and we will be able to arrive at night." Tony thought about finding a middle way. "All right. Now that the time is set, then go." After all, Eno hasn't seen the car with his own eyes. After all, he has no interest in the car, and so is Angela. So the two have not been to the car for so many years. "When you come tomorrow, take away the special medicine and thinner by the way." At the speed of Helen and Angela, it would take less than 3 days to strengthen these two things. Tony was taken aback. "So fast? Then you don't have to wait for 2 days to learn from the confrontation between Party A and Party B in society." "It's the first time I heard such a cheap one." Tony reacted immediately. "Forget it, my life is more important." At this moment, there was a knock on the door of the lounge. "Tony, I bought milk tea and pizza." Outside the door, I'm not sure if they have. Good talk, so knock on the door first. Tony looked at Eno, and Eno nodded. This is the meaning of nothing important. Then Tony said, come in, we are all very hungry. Hearing Tony's words, Pepper opened the door and walked in. After she put milk tea and pizza here, she was about to leave. Eno watched her leave and reminded, help me contact Angela to pick me up. Why don't you go to see other places in Stark? Why are you going back so quickly? Tony also wants to take Eno to see his laboratory. Although there is nothing important in it, some ideas can still be discussed. Leave Angela and Helen in my house not to look at them. Chatting with you for a long time with a man about me is something wrong or you have something wrong. Tony looked at Pepper suddenly, his eyes were. Look at him, he hugs right and left like that. Pepper knew Tony's eyes, she said to Tony, just two. Tony, what is meant by two women now are so easy to understand. Then why can't I be two? How can you be so double-labeled? Eno lightly picked up a cup of milk tea and sucked it, and the other hand also picked up a piece with a tissue pizza. You can't learn this operation. Tony looked at Eno, then looked back at Pepper. He once again felt that it was men why we thought differently. In the end, Tony was discouraged and picked up a cup of milk tea. Then catching a piece of pizza is a meal, nah. It seems that he wants to use all his chi on pizza. After Pepper saw that it was all right, she said as she left, I'll contact Angela to pick you up. Seeing Pepper go, Tony immediately threw down the pizza that was like a dog in his hand, looked at Eno and asked, how did you do it? How to do it? Eno asked rhetorically. Angela Ziegler and Zhao Hailun. Tony looks like you don't give me sloppy eyes. Eno thought for a while, motioned to himself with his hand in front of him and said, charm. What superpower? Tony immediately followed up with interest. Eno, what kind of superpowers or personality charms? Tony didn't dare to say. What? Then I have no charm. You have a hammer. Eno is so angry. Tony began to fall into deep thought. He held the milk tea in his hand, and the pizza didn't eat anymore. Just when Eno felt whether he was sick, Tony raised his head instantly. I'm done. From now on, not only will Stark Industries learn from the umbrella, I will also follow you. You have done it, then it means the road ahead is okay, and I have to try it too. Eno. He looked at the Iron Man like an Iron Man. He really didn't know what kind of paste he had in his mind. Eno put down the pizza in his right hand, patted Tony on the shoulder, and said, I tell you, it's better for people to be focused, don't always think about this. Sao operation. Quote. I think anyone can talk about me but you alone can't talk about me like that. Tony looked at Eno like a fisheye. And did you touch me with your hand holding the pizza? I wrapped it in tissues. Eno picked up the pizza that had just been put down. Furthermore, anyway, you have to take a shower when you're all sweaty. Jingling bell. Speaking of this, Eno's personal phone rang. Eno saw Angela's call. This shows that she has arrived downstairs. Eno's left-handed milk tea and right-handed pizza stood up. I'll go back first, see you tomorrow night. Tony took off his gloves, and after sending Eno out, he waved his hand and said, see you tomorrow night. Current guy. Angela drove back to the company with Eno. Inside the office on the top floor, Angela put on the lab coat and asked curiously, why does Tony say that you are a current charge? What does that mean? You and Zhao Hailun. Eno took a comfortable trip to the boss chair. Angela immediately understood what it meant to be charged. Then I'll go to the lab first, and Stark's special medicine and thinner are almost ready. Angela said she wanted to go to the basement. Wait a moment. Eno did it. You tell Hailun Zhao, tomorrow night we will go to Monaco to rest and watch one car. Why are you going to watch the car suddenly? Angela questioned. Tony wants to go and call us together. Angela nodded, raised her leg and walked to the laboratory elevator, and said, I feel this is bad news for her. Eno, it's still bad news for the boss to take you on a trip. Just then, Eno's phone received a text message. Collison, is there time for an appointment tomorrow afternoon? Our director Ferry wants to meet you and talk about some important things. Eno allocated some time to reply. Eno, you can come afternoon tomorrow, but I have something to do in the afternoon, so I try to come as early as possible. Collison seconds back. Okay, Mr. Eno. Turn off the phone. Eno thought about what Ferry was doing again, what else to find himself this time, the next day. Umbrella Building. Top office. It is 12 noon. After Eno processed his daily emails, he began to observe all the movements about himself on the internet. First of all, the limbs of the nano-neurobiomechanical machinery have been out of stock. After all, in the beginning, the umbrella did not sell such a desperate item and can only produce technology in its own factory. Under various conditions, the limbs of the umbrella will be sold out as long as one batch is produced. This has also led to the fact that there are nearly 9-digit numbers on the umbrella's bill every day. And everyone who bought it was tearful and praised the benefits of this department. Eno casually clicked on the video interviewing the disabled from the TV station. Reporter: what is it like to use biomechanical limbs with umbrella technology? User: there is no feeling at all, but you may not understand what I mean. I mean I am the same as a normal person, there is no difference, so there is no feeling. Now, all the pictures of umbrellas are hanging in my house, and it's Eno is my belief. The reporter heard the user's fanatical words, a little embarrassed, she thought it was too much. But people who haven't experienced this kind of feeling don't understand it. Eno continues to check the message. There is a unified heat collection that is. Senate Iron Man, Umbrella, and the relationship between the gods. Click to open this forum. Eno flipped down casually. Uniform supporters are all making statements that they are protecting the people. If it weren't for the gods, the streets of Harlem abhorred the riot army at all. Although Hulk's first appearance is rather chaotic, but fortunately, it is more white afterwards. And Iron Man also thinks this is a performance of reformation. After all, the weapon manufacturing department is directly closed. Later, they also vigorously develop clean energy, do charity and so on. Well, the purpose of charity is the same. Next, the changes on the network will not be much. Basically, the enthusiasm of the gods is still there, but since Eno did not change his body and went out. A group actually appeared on the internet, and every day he wanted the gods to appear. But how could it appear? I'm in the house, where can the gods go? At this moment, a message came from the front desk that someone from the 2 previously ordered departments has arrived. One is the familiar Collison. One is a man named Nick Fury with a blindfold. Eno: let them go. Upon hearing this, the front desk handed a chip to Collison, the same. Coulson smiled at the front desk and took Ferry to the elevator that went up to the top office alone. After arriving at the top office, Eno stood up and smiled. Rare guest Ferry, this is the first time the umbrella building has come. He took Fury to the side of the sofa. Ferry nodded, observing Eno's office, and then followed Eno to the lounge area of the sofa, and then said, no wonder Tony said that his internet electronic technology is like a fire stick in your place. That's how you protect your data. During this time, Coulson consciously went to get cups to help Eno and Fury get coffee. Here, he is familiar. Eno nodded. I don't have top-notch network technology. If you put all the important information on the internet, wouldn't everyone know it? Everyone knows that everything is true, the network is really insecure, and Tony can't guarantee that his home will not be hacked 100%. In this way, Fury suddenly asked curiously, then how do you save the technical information? Of course, it's more top secret, so I didn't ask. Ha ha ha, there is nothing to say about it. Eno simply said, the most primitive way is the safest way. Our data is divided into 2 physical files, and you can only know the password if you put them together, otherwise you won't understand anything even if you take one of them. If the information were more top secret, it would be simpler. After Eno finished speaking, he clicked his brain under the curious eyes of Marinated and Collison. It's all inside. Biomanipulators, precision instrument data, nano-nerve control systems, etc. In a word, nodding praise to Fury. But after complimenting the eggs, he said, no wonder your head is so valuable in the black market, but your method is simple to say but not easy to do at all. Braised eggs. And even Dama Jindao asked. Since that day, I went back and learned a little bit about biology. Although the human brain has rich storage capacity, it is logical to carry it. It's not something you can remember if you want to write it down. Such a huge amount of information depends on your brain. Eno nodded naturally, picked up a cup of Collison's poured coffee and leaned on the sofa. Seeing the default Eno, the halogen egg nodded, and said to his heart, newbie is really useless. This method of memorizing data is something that humans can do. Now who has the function of reading brains, except for, that, the transformed nebula, she can play the memories in her mind. Okay, let's talk about a very important thing. When the time is almost up, Ferry will say something important. Eno gestured with the coffee hand. Ferry looked at Eno seriously and said, you know Tony's steel armor, right? Who doesn't know this? Eno spit. Ferry nodded. Then do you know the energy supply of his suit of armor? Concentration arc reactor. Eno simply replied, I still have a large one. Correct. Ferry nodded cautiously. But do you know what the element Tony uses is, but he put that thing in his chest. Wait a moment. Eno finally knows what Frey is doing. And many more. Eno interrupted. Are you here to tell me about Tony Palladium poisoning? You know. Ferry questioned. Ah. Eno's mouth twitched. I'm a bio company, but you can also understand this as Tony told me. Ferry heard an involuntary handshake. He thought that the relationship between Tony and Eno in the live broadcast, the best friend is limited to Tony. But who would have thought of this sentence? My best friend is actually considered Iron Man. Okay. Ferry said. Then I will simply say, I want to find you to make. The special effects and diluents are already ready. Eno interrupted directly. Ferry. He suddenly felt that he was in vain. It turns out that the relationship between people is so good, he now thinks too much. Ferry opened his hand helplessly when he heard this. I'm gone, do you have anything to say? Neither did I, didn't you come to find me? Eno looked at Ferry inexplicably. The halogen egg nodded, stood up silently, and left with Collison directly. Don't be muddled, just leave without saying a word. I guess Ferry was thinking about it. It resounds when I am S.H.I.E.L.D. The intelligence experts actually did everything in advance. People know about palladium poisoning. Everyone has to make the reagents. Eno sat on the boss chair for a while and looked at the marinated egg that had slumped back. He hasn't said that the reward is a steel suit. If you know this, Ferry may be sour-faced twisted. After the marinated eggs are gone, 3 in the afternoon. The umbrella ushered in a more important guest, the vice president. Eno looked at the middle-aged man in front of him. He was more than one person. He also brought his daughter. What's your name? Eno crouched in front of the girl's wheelchair and asked. Dina. After that, the little girl blinked and looked at the handsome big brother in front of her. In her world, she thinks that the big brother in front of her is just the big brother. Rodriguez looked at the man in front of him in surprise. His daughter may not be known to others, but he knows that his daughter basically does not take the initiative to speak because of her disability. And let alone seeing strangers. Usually when someone is a guest at home, he doesn't dare to lead them to his daughter. Hearing the little girl's words, Eno stood up and returned to his seat. He looked at Rodriguez and wondered what to call him. Rodriguez proactively said cordially after seeing Eno, just add a gentleman. Eno nodded. Then Mr. Rodriguez, the biomechanical limbs of the umbrella are definitely available as you, why are you looking for me? This is a vice president, even if the biomechanical prosthesis is out of stock, it is not necessary to find a middleman. He didn't need to come to him at all. Rodriguez first picked up his daughter from the wheelchair, then walked to the sofa and sat down, put her daughter on her lap and said, no matter how biomechanical prosthesis is, it is also a prosthesis. And my daughter Dina, she can't always wear a prosthesis, so I think. Speaking of this, the vice president even said in an imploring tone, can the umbrella be researched on bioremediation technology, let my daughter rebirth from a severed limb. Upon hearing this, Eno finally understood why he would rather take such a big risk in Iron Man 3. It turns out that my daughter is in control to the extreme. But there is no need to say that. He is in a high position, and it is reasonable to do it for his relatives and daughter. Sitting in the boss chair, Eno crossed his hands in front of him and said in a deep voice, Mr. Rodriguez, rebirth from a severed limb is not just for fun. The difficulty of this technique is simply fantastic. Although I can regenerate your daughter from a severed limb now, it is impossible. And to be honest, why this? The vice president wants to let the umbrella study these two things, sympathy and power. He is daydreaming. The umbrella can even make you or not the previous and next vice president. I see if you want the approval rate. Suddenly, Rodriguez said anxiously. You have the top scientists in biology, cytology, neurology, etc., and biomechanical prostheses have also been made. Why can't you go further? Mr. Rodriguez, Eno slowly said. Such research costs are not proportional to the benefits of recycling, and we will waste a lot of money in vain. It is enough for the people to have invisible biomechanical prostheses. Although your family is not in business, it shouldn't be ignorant of these truths. Rodriguez stiffened suddenly. It's not that he doesn't know, he just wants to report some expectations. So no matter whether it is possible or not, he will try the previous sentence. Finally, after thinking about it, Rodriguez gritted his teeth. He looked at Eno suddenly and asked, There is no recording or video recording here, right? Eno waved his hand and said, How could there be video and audio recording in this kind of place? But he is expecting what this Mr. Vice President will say, or what conditions he will give. What conditions can even be tempted by oneself? Finally, Rodriguez said solemnly, I know there is a magical person in this world. She has magical abilities because the molecular structure in the body is extremely unstable. This allows her to go through walls, avoid attacks, and even become invisible. I know that such a person is very attractive to Umbrella Bio Inc. Hearing what Rodriguez said, Eno knew who he was talking about. That is, Ava Starr, nickname, Ghost, but, whatever this deputy can do with her, his position can't be forced to transfer S.H.I.E.L.D. Secret agent. Eno nodded and admitted. Yes, it is very attractive to umbrellas, but then, whatever, you can get her over and let me study. Rodriguez said quickly. No, I can't mobilize her directly, she belongs to the special department. But I can let her meet with you, and even find a reason to be your bodyguard for a while. But there is only a short time. You have to hurry up and study her. During this time, she belongs only to you. Eno meditates. Ava's ability is indeed useful, she can be said to be an assassin. And he is still a promising assassin in the future. But the ability to regenerate from a severed limb has been researched. To be honest, Eno can use his own ability to parasitize this little girl immediately. But if you want Angela and Zhao Hailun to study it, although it is not impossible to study it, it is a waste of time. After much deliberation, Eno decided to ask before thinking, How long will you take? Rodriguez looked at the daughter on his lap, and said in a sad tone, I can wait 3 years. In these 3 years, I will let Dina use biomechanical limbs. Speaking of this, he solemnly looked at Eno and asked with a very serious expression, I can advance the payment in advance, but I just hope that you can solve my daughter's problem as soon as possible. Then there is nothing bad to refuse. 3 years is the year 201, and the umbrella is some time, and it may be solved by picking it up at that time. Thinking of this, Eno stood up, walked to his daughter Dina and squeezed her cheek. Your daughter is so cute, I have agreed to this condition. Hearing Eno praise his daughter's cuteness, Rodriguez smiled. He stretched out his hand to shake hands with Eno and said, Happy cooperation. Happy cooperation. Eno shook his hand. Then, Rodriguez took out a note and handed it to Eno. This is my personal phone, you can call me if you need it. Eno nodded and accepted the note. Finally, Eno patted his shoulder. When you go down, just ask the front desk to go to the inventory and help you get a prosthesis. Of course, no money. Rodriguez nodded and put his daughter in the wheelchair. Then he pushed his daughter out of the office. Before leaving, his daughter returned, Goodbye, big brother. Goodbye. Eno beckoned. Back in his seat, Eno considers how to deal with Ava. First of all, Ava is a very life-saving girl. She not only got the functions of wall penetration and invisibility because of the branch problem in the body. In the same way, she also suffered from the torn of the molecules in the body. That is pain that doesn't hurt from the beginning to the end of the whole body. And the solution: 1. The substructure in her body has stabilized. 2. is that she can control the molecular structure of the body. 3. is to have a strong physical fitness to counteract the instability of this molecule. The above methods are all mastered in the same way, and that is a real ghost. Thinking of this, Eno accidentally had a magical idea. Do you want to try, make Ava betray S.H.I.E.L.D.? Ava is in S.H.I.E.L.D., not on the front. It was a secret agent in another special department, different from Natasha and Collison. At the same time, because she cherishes her life, she crazily wants to stabilize the three elements of the molecular structure and pain in her body. Eno can definitely try to make her be loyal to herself and betray S.H.I.E.L.D. You can give it a try. Time, just set it to come back from Monaco with Tony. Because there would be a whiplash there, Rodriguez could use this reason to temporarily transfer Ava. Of course, this reason is just to find one randomly. After all, it can't be for no reason, right? The time is close to night. It's still in the top office of the Umbrella. Angela and Zhao Hailun are now using their abilities to change their clothes and rest here, because they will be going to Monaco by private jet later. There are people like this. Oh my god, Zhao Hailun exclaimed, holding his small mouth and said, isn't this superpower? Eno just popularized them about Ava's abilities and told them the important things during the time when the vice president came just now. No, no, no. Eno hurriedly interrupted. The concept of superpower is innate, she is a later ability to acquire and integrate. But the point is, can we study? Angela suddenly said. Are there physicists who are doing it? That is the entanglement of molecules and quantum, we know very little. I forgot about it. Although molecules have physics, biology, and chemistry. But the main thing is physics, followed by biology. Ava came over, and they still had too little research. Study it slowly. Eno shrugged. You treat her as a treasure, anyway, if she betrays S.H.I.E.L.D. Then, don't you just have to be by our side all the time? And she can do a lot of things, such as assassination and protection, although we don't need protection. After Zhao Hailun and Angela looked at each other, they nodded together. If there is a secret, I am afraid that there is a problem with the brain. If you can master this technology, there will be great breakthroughs in the quantum field. And then it will be of great help to all kinds of basic particulate matter. At this time, Tony should be coming soon. After Eno decided what happened to Ava and looked at the time. 1. Tony is not here yet. At this moment, Eno's personal phone rang. When I picked it up, it was Tony's phone. After the connection. Hey Eno, quickly open your building apron in advance, I will be there soon. Quote. This guy originally wore Mark's armor and Eno returned to his seat, opened the control panel, and then pressed one of the buttons. The gate next to the roof apron on the top floor of the Umbrella building opens. Let's go, this man comes in armor. Eno said to Angela and Helen, who were curious about his operation just now. It turned out to be this way, no wonder they walked down from the rooftop. The three of them left the office and came to the innermost part of the top floor, where there was only one door leading to the rooftop apron. After a while, a red-yellow figure crossed the sky, his hands and feet sprayed energy down, and there seemed to be something hanging on his body. Hey, as Iron Man landed, Tony's visor opened and he squeezed his eyebrows toward Eno and said, "Are you handsome?" Eno didn't answer him, but instead looked at the suitcase in Tony's hand and said, "This is your condensed suitcase, Mark Battle Armor." Tony's suitcase at this time is not red and yellow, but red and silver. This Mark Battle Armor is his 5th generation battle armor. There is no difference in function, but the advantage is, it is more portable than the previous generation. But there is a downside, it only has one layer of armor. Yes, Tony lifted the box in his hand and said, "This was taken to Monaco. After all, it may be dangerous, but the suit I wear is for you. It's good to put you here by the way. You are so generous, you can't even give a few billions." Eno vomited. This is worth billions. Tony walked to the office with Eno and said, "The most important thing is technology. Billions are just the cost, and of course the most important thing. Then our direct friendship." Eno suddenly took a few more steps, a little further away from Tony. Looking at Tony's questioning eyes, "You just talked like Tony." While talking, a few people came to the office. "By the way, where did Pepper go? She won't be with you." Tony looked at Eno in his armor and said, "The car she drove should be coming soon." Really straight guy, awesome. After viewing Eno's office, Tony said, "This suit of armor has a pure and clean system. You can set it up by yourself. I didn't leave a secret door." Eno waved his hand indifferently, he didn't care about this, he didn't use this suit of armor. "You can just take off that corner." "What?" Tony was unwilling for a moment. "My steel armor, you let me go to the corner." Are you worthy of it? Then here, Eno pointed to his bookcase. It's okay. Tony walked over, and the abdomen, chest, legs, hands, head and other components of the battle armor opened. Then he walked out of it, and the armor closed automatically. Tony revisited Eno's office again. You are planning to use no technology products except computers. Are you stupid or me stupid? Eno looked at Tony and said, if I put the core data of the umbrella on the server, then you will immediately know what the biggest cyber attack in the world is. 2. Tony nodded. But I said before that you don't want to give you a technology office. Not used to it, Eno said silently. There will be better in the future, and it is still an area that technology can't touch, and the safety and practical performance is unparalleled. So now there is no need to change it for these. At this moment, Tony's cell phone rang. He glanced at it and hung up the phone. Little Pepper is here, let's go. Eno nodded, and the 4 people set off to the garage to pick up the car to the private airfield. In the umbrella building, Tony and Eno, who suddenly appeared by these employees, were surprised. The relationship is so good that we have come to play with each other. It seems that our previous trip to Stark was not fake. After getting in the car, Angela drove to the airport. Tony gave the suitcase to his driver Hogan and drove Pepper to the airport with him. Ride on a private jet. Pepper and Angela prepared their drinks together and put them on the platform in the cabin to sit down together. The flight will take several hours. It's probably 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning to arrive at the International 5-star Hotel in Monaco. Tony put the armor suitcase by the chair and picked up a glass of wine and said, why do I suddenly feel that the women around you are all excellent? Hearing Tony's words, Eno couldn't help but look at Angela and Zhao Hailun who were talking to Pepper behind Tony. If so, the 2 of them are indeed very powerful, at least, among all women, they can be said to be the most powerful. But Eno still humbly picked up a glass of wine and said, the charm is good. ... Tony nodded and took a sip of wine. Now the word charm has become my most annoying word. After that, the 2 drank a little wine while chatting. At this time, after 9 o'clock in the evening, Nuo turned his head to look at the night view outside the airplane window. Tomorrow's one car will start at 9 o'clock and will continue for several days. The whip lock will also appear there, but it is useless, and there will be Ava's affairs afterwards. Tony saw Eno quietly looking out the window and suddenly surprised. I didn't expect you to have this kind of hobby. Eno turned his head. What's wrong with this hobby? I have read a report. Tony raised the cup in his hand and motioned to Eno to shout together. The report explains, if someone particularly likes to see the stars, the moon, the night sky, etc., then he must really like to ask himself, and he often reflects on his actions and revises his own practices. He will have a lot of thoughts in his heart, and he will constantly modify his plot, and then make himself as better as possible than yesterday. In summary, people who have this hobby will reflect and contemplate, and they can't guess what he is thinking. Ha ha ha. Eno smiled happily when Tony said, how can there be so many things? I just love to watch it, although there is indeed a lot of inner contemplation. That means this report is a bit correct, doesn't it? Tony took a sip of wine. That's it. In the end, Tony was drunk and fell asleep in a chair. And Eno still only used his power to control his blush. Oh my God, you drink too much. Pepper exclaimed when he came to pack Tony. Well, not bad. After Eno finished speaking, Angela also came to support him. Then there will be a quiet rest time. After all, there is still a while. A few hours later, 1 a.m., the private jet finally arrived in Monaco. Angela and Pepper drove everyone to the back of the International Hotel. Pepper delivered Tony, who was so drunk, to Hogan and went to the front desk to pick up the 2 rooms that had already been booked. Then it was Angela's turn. She walked to the front desk and looked at Zhao Hailun behind her while taking care of Eno, who pretended to be sitting in a chair to rest. She showed the electronic message to the front desk and said, a big room, which was booked before. The lady at the front desk saw that she took out the room card and gave it to Angela. Then she went back and helped Helen to help Eno, who was pretending to be drunk, into the room. When passing by Pepper, Angela still said, bye, see you tomorrow morning. Pepper was stunned at Angela who had only booked 1 room. She turned to look at Hogan, who was carrying Tony, and said, look at Tony, he doesn't have such a charm. Hogan nodded honestly. During the hangover, Tony seemed to have heard someone say those two words that had just become his most annoying and moved unfaithfully. After returning to the big room, Eno let go and embraced Angela and Zhao Hailun's hands. He glanced at the decoration of this international hotel and nodded, not bad. It's almost 100,000 meters per night, which is of course not bad. Angela said as she unbuttoned her coat. She just wants to relax, don't think too much. Angela was on the soft sofa at once, and would go to the bubble bath according to her habit. But she didn't have this habit outside. Angela put her hands on the sofa and looked at Zhao Hailun, who was a little restrained, teasing, now there are 3 beds. Eno will sleep the largest in the middle. I will decide later, Helen, which one you want to choose. This room has 3 bedrooms, a hall, the middle bedroom is the largest and the bed is also the largest. But Angela first clearly pointed out which Eno should sleep. Then he pointed out that he would wait for Helen to make a decision before deciding. This will force Helen onto it all at once. I sleep that one. Helen was anxious and moved to the smallest bedroom. Angela sadly spread her hands out. You decide by yourself. It means I gave you a chance. But you are not useful. Suddenly, Helen had the idea of going back. The next day, Angela came out of Eno's room first, and happened to meet Helen, who was getting up to wash. Angela raised her hand and shook her hello, good morning. Morning, good morning. Helen blushed back. Last night, Helen waited for a long time at night and did not hear Angela's special voice. In the end, after waiting for a long time, Helen fell asleep unconsciously. But actually Angela and Eno didn't do anything last night. It's just a habit of sleeping together every day. After all, outside, it is still a hotel. Although it is international, it still has no such thoughts. After all washing up, everyone came to the breakfast room of the hotel for breakfast. If you want a hotel of this level, you can choose to have the waiter order and deliver food or go to a better special restaurant for dinner. After seeing Eno coming, Tony called H and asked, why are you so energetic after staying up late yesterday? Eno patted Tony's shoulder comfortingly. I am young and vigorous, and you are old. Well, Tony, who just got up, was hit. After a little bit of breakfast. Everyone dared to go to the 5-star hotel in Paris that is cooperating with this competition schedule. Last night it was because I found it nearby. And this is a banquet hotel cooperating with the event. With 2 special vehicles drove to the Paris Banquet Hall Hotel. 6 bikes drove in front of the vehicles to lead the way and evacuate the way. Tony has already greeted the people here, and is a recent hot umbrella and Stark. The organizer here can be said to have waited in advance. With reaching the destination, Tony and Eno opened the car door and came out at the same time. Wow! After getting off the car, the crowds on both sides of the track cheered loudly for the 2 people they saw. Because the recognition of these 2 people is too high. Entering the banquet hall, Angela and Zhao Hailun followed Eno. Hogan followed Tony with his suitcase. After a few people went in, they found a specially reserved table and sat down. In a short while, a waiter will come over to arrange the desserts and drinks. Hello Mr. Stark, hello Mr. Eno. As soon as they sat down, a voice came from behind the 2. After Tony turned his head, Eno also saw this person, but it was a bit embarrassing. He doesn't know what this person is called. So I can only wait for Tony to speak. Tony shook hands to the man. Hi, Musk, Merlin is stuck with the engine. Thanks, it just so happens that I still want to use the electric jet. Real or fake? Real, then we can work together. Tony dismissed the man after 3 times, 5 and 2. He introduced to Eno. He is in the aerospace industry. I have worked with him before, but he does not yet have the ability to launch satellites. Eno is eating dessert, which has nothing to do with herself. After Tony saw it, we are here to see the car, how come you make it like a honeymoon? You are jealous, Eno said silently. I suspended for a while. The amount on my fashion cover is no less than yours, although the quality is not good. But just when Tony and Eno were eating dessert and waiting for the first car race to start. Tony, hi, is that you? When Tony heard this voice, uncomfortable, said to Eno, the guy the first hate the most is here. Hey, how are you? Justin Hammer walked behind Tony and patted him on the shoulder. Hi, Eno, so are you. Then he greeted Eno again. Tony turned his head and nodded at him, Justin Hammer. But Eno continued to talk to Angela and Helen without raising his head. Seeing Eno ignoring himself, Hammer said in a pompous tone, "You are not the only ones who have the money to let the official heavy-duty team take the lead." At this moment a woman in a dark green short dress came over. Hammer looked at her and pointed at Pepper and said, "This is Jenny, the reporter of Small World. You should interview Pepper. This is big news, the new CEO of Stark Industries." "I see." Jenny nodded and took out the notebook and said, "If I don't interview you, I will be scolded to death by the editor-in-chief." "Correct." Han Mokai echoed next to him. "She is going to interview me in Flicky World, so I think she can also interview you." Pepper ignored Hammer and looked directly at the female reporter. "You also helped Tony do it last year." After an interview, the female reporter calmly agreed. "Yes, that's right, and there is a detailed report." With that said, the female reporter took out a voice recorder and opened the recording. Hanmo understood in an instant. He looked at Tony, and then at Jenny. It turned out that he was playing the rest. Eno looked at the person who suddenly took out the recording notes without asking for permission and said directly, "Turn it off, or get out." To such an impolite person, Eno will not give her politeness, even if it is a woman. When the female reporter heard Eno's words, she quickly turned off the recorder and took out the notebook and pen from her bag. "I'm sorry, I turned it off." Since it was turned off, Eno ignored her, but continued to talk to Angela and Helen. "Oh, our Eno is angry. What will happen if he is reported to be mad in front of the public?" At this time, Hammer found out that he was yin and yang again. "Will you be scolded? Will you be sued by the Women's Federation?" Although Hammer said he was happy, what he didn't realize was the female reporter named Jenny became more and more embarrassed. In the image of Eno, she is afraid of being scolded. And he took out the recorder directly without being polite. Eno looked back at Hanmo helplessly. Tony also rarely patted Silent on the shoulder. "If you can sue Eno, or defeat him on the internet, I will give you Stark Industries." At this time, Hammer had already noticed something wrong. He looked at the extremely embarrassed female reporter Jenny. Look at Tony who is confident and Eno who doesn't pick him up. "I have something to go now." After speaking, he ran away dingy. Tony looked at Hammer who ran away. He turned his head and said to the female reporter Jenny, "You can report him as stupid." Jenny was embarrassed to write down this sentence, and as for the report, she must go back and ask the editor-in-chief. After speaking, Tony looked at Eno again and said, "You are still talking about love, but there is a little white flower reporter waiting here." Hearing Tony's words, Angela's face was normal, but Helen turned a little red and took a sip of the juice. Eno looked at this female reporter. Although she was impolite before, she corrected it quickly. "Ask." The female reporter Jenny suddenly asked, "Since you and Mr. Tony won the Senate last time, the stock of Stark Industries has been trading at a daily limit, but what have you got? As everyone knows that umbrella companies are not listed, what do you think after this big victory?" The female reporter's mouth is Gu Lala's mouth and asks recent hot issues on the internet. Eno explained, "As the invited party, I did not go for the purpose of benefit first, and the umbrella does not need a purpose. And just the night before I went, all the products produced by the umbrella were sold out, and the orders piled up to a terrifying level. Tony and I just want to tell everyone that Umbrella and Stark are for the people and society, and we can be the hard backing of the people, just like the meaning of the umbrella. I am your umbrella." As soon as the female reporter heard such a righteous statement, she immediately wrote down Eno's words in the notebook using the shorthand method that the reporter must learn. This is to be said to the people, of course it is better to say. In modern society, who can carry justice? Whoever is the banner of the United States can win the victory with fair and smooth success. So, justice, it's required. Of course, if you have to pick up evil. If you can win with the banner of Eno will carry it without hesitation. This is just a layer of skin. After Eno finished speaking, Tony added another sentence. Of course Iron Man and the gods will also be the backing of the people, you can rest assured. Quote. Eno suddenly turned his head to look at Tony. I don't know why the gods said this. Hey, didn't he protect the people? Just treat him as a chant. Anyway, his fan base is so huge. Tony said. Eno opened his mouth to say something fair. But he is Eno now, not a god. How to be fair? After thinking for a while, Eno turned his head. I'm done with the interview, you can interview Tony. The female reporter Jenny suddenly turned to another page of the book with regret, watching Tony starting the interview. And after Eno turned his head, Zhao Hailun and Angela are obviously laughing secretly. Laughing I make you laugh. Eno's hand suddenly dropped and stretched out to them. After a while, they won't be able to laugh. I didn't do anything, just smooth my thighs. Then the female reporter began interviewing Tony. But before Tony could say a few words, a waiter walked up to Tony and said quietly, "Mr. Stark, your workbench is ready." Tony nodded and let him go. Then Tony stood up and looked at Pepper and said, "I'll go to the bathroom and come back later." He left after speaking. Before leaving, Tony also made a gesture of holding the steering wheel to Eno. Okay, he is going to drive a car. After Tony left, the female reporter looked at Eno, who had already finished the interview, and looked at Tony, who had already left. Her gaze turned to Pepper. "May I ask what it's like to be promoted to CEO by Miss Pepper?" Pepper thought for a while and simply said, "Well, I am honored and will work hard to do this job well. After all, I just finished interviewing Tony and Eno. If she speaks a little louder, wouldn't she look down on the two in front of her?" "Okay." Jenny slurs down Pepper's words. "Miss Pepper, you were right." And many more. Pepper interrupted directly. She suddenly noticed that Tony appeared in the broadcast video behind the female reporter Jenny. She stood up suddenly and watched the video carefully. "It's Tony." Pepper looked back at Eno for an answer. But of course Eno spread his hands and said that I didn't know. Tony never told me. Correct. The most is, compared to a few gestures that he wants to drive. But he didn't tell me it was a one car. So I don't remember this pot. During the broadcast, Tony said to the live broadcast, "What is the purpose of owning a car is to drive him to race, otherwise, what do you want the car to do?" After watching it, Pepper looked at Eno anxiously and said, "He can't race, it's too dangerous. If you compare it with normal data, the one car is even safer than ordinary cars." Eno comforted Pepper and said, "Even if you crash and smash the racer in the car, you won't be life-threatening." Hearing Eno's words, Pepper calmed down a bit. But she still held her hands nervously. At this moment, hum, 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 the sound of racing cars passing by Eno. And Tony's blue car is in it. At this time, the director of the broadcaster suddenly turned a scene. Tony walked slowly in the front of the track, a staff, in orange overalls. He has a toothpick in his hand and a black tattoo on his hand, even on his neck. At this glance, I know that it is not a normal staff member. But this is Ivan Vanke, who also lashes out. He pushed aside the fence of the track. Paula, throwing two whips from sleeves. Accompanied by the power supply of the fake arc reactor. The high temperature of the two energy channels behind him directly burned the clothes and was blown away. Pepper looked at Eno instantly when he saw it. What to do? She was so panicked that she didn't know what to do. Eno looked at her. "Where is Mark's suitcase?" Pepper reacted instantly. Limala grabbed Eno's hand and ran out, in the car. Seeing Eno being pulled away, Angela and Helen glanced at each other and followed. 4 rolls at the door. After Eno got up, Pepper just wanted to drive. Angela got into the driving seat first. When the high heels were taken off, the accelerator was stepped on, and the car engine sounded. "Sit down." "What?" The dazed Pepper was pulled into the back seat by Zhao Hailun, and the car, boom. Without even closing the door. Slammed out. There are still a few dark tire marks on the road. At this time, the vehicle in front of Tony had been thrown off by the whip lock. And this time, it was Tony's turn. Boom. When Tony's blue car passed by, the energy-filled whip was thrown directly from the front of the car. Fortunately, the legs of the one car are not straight, but half bent inside. Otherwise, his legs will be cut off in the same way. Angela is still driving the Rolls-Royce, retrograde to the track and dare to go. The roaring engine and Angela's ability to react have escaped countless racing cars. After a while, Rolls-Royce with a speed of 1 km/h is about to rush to Tony's scene. Angela drove the car and said to Pepper without looking back, "Give me Mark's suitcase." After Pepper heard this, he passed the suitcase in his hand in a daze. The Tony incident and the excitement of the drag racing just now left Pepper blanking his head. Now her brain is at a loss. Angela took the suitcase that Pepper handed over, and then took the suitcase in her left hand. Holding the steering wheel with one hand with his right hand, step on the accelerator pedal to the end. When Tony was circling the Whiplash, he saw his car approaching here at a glance. He yelled, "Throw my suitcase. Don't drive the car. It's dangerous here." Just now, several cars were smashed by a charging whip. Tony was afraid that they would be in danger as well. Eno looked at the distance at this time. It should be the limit of ordinary people. Angela threw it over and said, "Angela, just throw it over." Angela nodded, and left the steering wheel with both hands holding the suitcase. Rolls-Royce whizzed past the whip lock in an instant. Because it was too fast, the whip lock couldn't even aim and took a few steps back. Then Whiplock looked at the blinded Tony and bit the toothpick in his mouth and said, "It seems that they are not going to save." Bang! Suddenly a red and silver suitcase flew over and hit his head directly. The one who was smashed by the whip lock fell to the ground and knelt. Tony looked back at a Rolls-Royce that had stopped drifting behind him and a suitcase drawn under his feet. He admired. "It's so good to be accurate." Tony stepped into the suitcase. The hands are reaching out to the two protruding hands. As the abdomen of the battle armor fits on his body, other pieces of parts are slowly assembled on his body. And Eno and Angela also got off the Rolls-Royce. Tony's driver doubles as a bodyguard. Hogan shakes his hand out of the toilet in the banquet hall at this time. Then he looked at the scene in the live broadcast where he just put on Mark's armor and prepared to fight with the Whiplash. He pulled his leg to the scene and ran. The scene of the incident. After Tony put on the steel armor, he immediately raised his hand and prepared to fire an energy cannon at the Whiplash that was climbing up. "Sorry." Scream. The whip lock half kneeled on the ground, and the energy whip in his hand was drawn to Tony's chest. Because there is only one layer of armor. A deep mark immediately appeared on Tony's armor chest. Tony realized right away, you can't stay next to each other in the same position. He turned sideways to cover his wounds. Raise his right hand again. "Sorry. It's better to draw a whip faster first. Because the energy hand cannon of the Mark battle armor needs to be charged, it needs to be delayed for a while to launch." Suddenly, Tony was directly hit by the car behind him. At this time Eno also got off the Rolls-Royce. And Pepper was still stunned in the car. Her legs were so weak that she couldn't get off. Angela and Helen walked to Eno and watched Tony, who was in a disadvantage not far away. Zhao Hailun thought Tony was a little idiotic and asked, "Why didn't he fly up to get a distance?" Angela glanced at Helen. "Because there is a warrior's heart, and sometimes support is also." Thinking of the current situation of that game, Zhao Hailun nodded in agreement. "Do you want to remind him?" Hearing Helen's words, Eno also felt that it was not good for the three of them to stand here and watch the play. Eno shouted to Tony, "You are a battle armor, can't you fly?" Tony, who was flew into the car by a whip, heard Eno's words and reacted instantly. He jerked his hands and feet down and flew into the sky. Whiplock saw Tony rushing over in a hurry and wanted to make up another whip. It's a pity. Tony's legs split a whip from between his legs. Almost can't be a man. Tony's face stood up in the sky, and he looked back at Eno. "Thank you for reminding, I just wanted to do this." Eno waved his hand to fight quickly. This time is still arrogant. At this moment, the sound of the helicopter came. Eno looked up and saw the country's military gunship. It seems that the impact of Tony and himself after being broadcast is so great that they directly use the military's power. But it's right. If you and Tony could die here. This survived tourism and commerce. But Tony immediately increased his energy to attack the Whiplock after seeing the gunship. He still has questions to ask Whiplock. Otherwise, the Whiplash will be shot directly by the gunship. He couldn't even ask questions. Extremely bang, 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 after banging for several shots at a height beyond the reach of the Whiplock. Ivan Vanki was stunned while wearing his flogging armor. After all except that whip, he doesn't have any defensive capabilities. As the helicopter slowly landed, Tony stepped forward to the pseudo-arc reactor with the Whiplock removed. See Tony's uniform Whiplock. The army of this country immediately went to hold Ivan Vanki. Tony looked at the arc reactor in his hand, and then said to Eno, who was walking behind him, "This is not bad, it's just horrible rubbish." Listening to Tony's remarks, Eno looked at Ivan Vanki, who was taken away, and pretended to ask, "Who is he?" "Have no idea." Tony looked at Vanki deeply, "But I will ask him." At this time, Ivan Vanki, who was crushed away, suddenly woke up. He spit out blood. Vanki vomited blood and laughed. "Tony, you lost, ha ha ha. Now I feel he is crazy." Tony turned his head to look at Eno when he heard Vanki's words. "He's talking about you." Eno pointed to Tony's chest. Vanki said that Tony's loss meant that his palladium was poisoned, not that he lost the battle. Tony saw Eno's fingers and then realized what his loss was. He shrugged his shoulders and said, "It's not time to lose or not to lose." After speaking, Tony took off his armor. After stacking several times, Mark's battle armor turned into a tattered suitcase. After going back, Tony tells Eno that he is going to interrogate Vanki. And Angela, Zhao Hailun and Pepper will wait for them to go back at the hotel. As for safety, Eno doesn't have to worry about it. Take Angela's physical fitness. How many ordinary people come? How many hammers? Tony came to the interrogation room where Vanki was being held. Eno stopped at the door and leaned against the wall. Tony was taken aback and asked, "Aren't you going in?" Eno shook his head. "After you have heard it, just tell me what you want to tell me, the others are not important." Tony took a deep breath and patted Eno's shoulder with confidence and entered. The first is that Tony trusts Eno to let Eno go in and listen. But Eno directly said that since it is something important to you, you can choose whether to tell me or not after you have heard it before you don't know it. With the door of the interrogation room closed. A few minutes later, the door opened again. Tony came out of it with a serious expression, but he glanced at the guards around him and said nothing. Eno knows what it means to go back. After that, the two returned to the hotel, met Angela and Pepper, and went directly to the private jet to return to New York. On a private jet, Tony brings Eno to the ballroom, but he doesn't come to dance, just find a place to talk. And Angela and Pepper were in the cabin outside. The two sit on a dark purple sofa. Tony put his hands on his back and asked, "Do you know what he said to me?" Eno gestured and said directly. Tony nodded. "His name is Ivan Vanki. According to Jarvis's investigation, his father is Anton Vanki. But it's not the most important thing. The most important thing is that his father worked with my father. But because his father tried to get rid of the project my father was cooperating with, my father expelled him from the US country. As for the content of the cooperation, I think it is related to energy, otherwise he will not be able to imitate my arc reactor." Eno nodded. "He must know a little bit of the technology in your chest, otherwise he wouldn't know that you are poisoned by palladium. When he said the first sentence you lost, only me, who knew it, would know. And you didn't even react, you can imagine how clear he is." Tony lowered his brow thoughtfully when he heard it. Although this matter does not seem to be a big problem, it is too annoying. The technology of the whiplock is nothing compared to the one in Tony's chest. It's nothing, even a high-power weapon can't be carried. For example, the energy cannon and flying function in Tony's hand. This fake arc reactor simply can't do it. After a while, Tony suddenly raised his head and lay on the sofa with his hands covering his face. His mood is very irritable now. After returning home, the company and the media still have a lot of things to deal with. And I also need to concentrate on studying palladium element poisoning. There will not be many tomorrow. He can't show it to Pepper. In fact, he doesn't care about it. Tony covers his face with his hands and said, "You know the last thing I want to do now is, go home. Give up." Eno took 2 bottles of wine from the refrigerator in the cabin and said, "The current technology of the umbrella can help you take this out of your chest. As long as you nod your head now, I can let Stephen Strange be your chief surgeon when you go back." Before Stephen Strange was a Doctor Strange. His surgical technique has always been among the best in the world. Although he would not do such a mistake that would ruin his life's surgery. But who calls Eno his? Just do it if you ask you to do it. Tony pondered for a moment, and took a few sips of a bottle of wine in Eno's hand that had just been opened. Grumbling, Tony let out a sigh of relief. "I'm a genius, I won't shrink from this incident. Even if my nerves and thinking are a little abnormal now, I still won't give up. Iron Man is me, I am Iron Man, if I give up it, am I still me? Pop, pop, pop. Eno clapped a few times. Then he opened another bottle of wine and touched Tony. Maybe I will tie you back for surgery at the last moment of your life. But even so, the degree of poisoning in your body is already too deep. After waking up, you may only be able to lie in bed for a lifetime until we develop an artificial organ. Oh no, Tony suddenly refused. It's better to let me die, so feel better. Who told you? Eno looked at Tony to deepen his memory and said, the method of death for palladium element poisoning is to die from the weakness of the whole body organs. Who told you that it is comfortable? Tony. Anyway, it's not good to die. While talking, Tony took out a palladium element poisoning tester from his pocket. He presses his thumb up. 64%. Ah, it's a bit bad. Tony happily put the tester back. At this time, he couldn't tell whether it was happy or uncomfortable. Seeing Tony, who had already drunk half a bottle, Eno took his bottle. Okay, you will be drunk if you drink it again. You want to make me drunk with this little wine? Tony protested immediately. I can drink a few more bottles. You can drink a few more bottles. Eno stood up and walked out of the ballroom. I'm leaving first, you continue to drink. Forget it. Tony dropped the bottle and followed. A door from the ballroom came to the cabin. Eno first saw Angela and Pepper, and Helen was watching the live news together. Stern was talking about the disadvantages of Iron Man. What? He said that at least 51 years will be a little bit of technology. We saw today, he is in Monaco. Where did Mr. Stark promise us that day? This is not only a concept, but his weapons have been realized in Monaco. What does this mean? This means that someone already owns this weapon privately. Then Iron Man can still protect us. This is how many times the Iron Man, can we still be safe? Stern is now directly substituting himself into the people to discredit Tony. He used the original words of Tony in the Senate to taunt Tony. Tony said directly, mute. Then the smart voice butler directly turned off the sound of the TV live broadcast. Tony pointed to the live broadcast and said, these are all small problems, his language will not have any effect on Stark. He is just a congressman who only talks about him. Why do you care about him? And Eno's toes can't compare with him. Don't use him to sicken my toes. Eno murmured and walked between Angela and Helen and sat down. Pepper looked at Tony. Although your last sentence is correct, it is not what you think. Next, a lot of news and government personnel will come to us to talk about this situation, and we still have to return. The bigger question is, how do you explain the other, Iron Man? Can you guarantee that he won't show up again? Tony was speechless. He really couldn't guarantee. Looking at the silent Tony, Pepper said in a breath, I will go back and finish all these things, but I hope you can also do a good job. Look at Mr. Eno. Noda's umbrella company handles everything in an orderly manner. Even if he is traveling, he will take some time in the morning to deal with important matters. But you can only be a shopkeeper, and then ignore the feelings of the employees. Suddenly, Pepper exploded the years of resentment directly in the cabin. Her character is indeed at odds with Tony. And basically Pepper is going to be Tony. You can't see Tony next to Pepper, of course, sometimes a little bit. But whether it's Tony or Pepper, both of them have their own ideas, but they don't understand each other temporarily. Pepper thought that as long as Tony was honest about developing the company, he would have nothing to worry about in his life. As for the relationship with the government, Tai Chi is over. But Tony knew that there were still many dangers in this world, not to mention the ones he didn't know. But even so, he is now also poisoned by palladium. If you want to live, you must solve this problem. Only then can the following matters be discussed. But he doesn't want Pepper to worry now. Pepper is the person he trusts most. Tony also didn't want to cause her more trouble than official business. She might collapse. After Tony was silent for a while, he looked at Pepper, who turned his head and angry. After thinking about it, he turned and left. Well, maybe it is to make grilled fish. Angela looked at the angry Pepper, got up and walked over to sit next to her to comfort her. After all, there is no second Eno in the world like her home. Angela has never been worried about Eno. Listening to Pepper complaining to Angela, Tony, an unreasonable voice. Eno saw Helen's expression at this time and smiled. Does it feel strange? Helen nodded. and she leaned into Eno's ear and whispered, I suddenly feel that Tony and Pepper are both mortal, and we can easily solve this problem. But when I get to them, distress, irritability, mental pressure, oppression, etc., are all torturing them. It makes me feel a very strange feeling, this is. After Helen thought about it carefully, she looked at Eno and whispered, this is how God feels. The corner of Eno's mouth smiled, and this time it was his turn to whisper the heater in Helen's ear. You can understand it as yes, or it can be understood as when you reach a higher level. When you look back, everything that used to be clouds, they are all so small. The things that used to be your turn to worry are no more than you. This is spiritual sublimation. Helen's delicate little ears were blushed by Eno's heater. She nodded with a reddish face. It really feels like this. They are distressed, but I can solve it casually. Looking back, I was just a little doctor a few months ago. But now, the difference between cloud and mud is not enough. Angela glanced at the two Eno while comforting Pepper. A happy smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. There is no harm without contrast. After a few hours of voyage, the plane arrived in New York. Tony asked Pepper to go back at the airport. His explanation was, I have something to talk to Eno. I'll go back in the evening. Hearing that Tony was looking for Eno instead of going out to play, Pepper nodded and agreed. Along the way, the umbrella convoy sent the Eno 4 people to the door of the umbrella building. If it weren't for the bodyguards to clean up the peripheral reporter group in time, it has long been blocked. After all, Eno showed up during the broadcast. He and a few people drove the steel armor to support Tony. And in the end, what else was said to help Iron Man? They all saw it in their eyes, and of course they all thought it was big news. Back to the umbrella building. Tony followed Eno to the top office. As soon as he walked in the door, Tony fell awkwardly. After a few steps, he almost fell and walked to the desk to support him. Eno walked to the side and helped him to sit on the sofa. I ran out of Palladium block. Pepper was in the car just now, I haven't taken it out. Tony panted and took out a small box from his body. After he opened it, it was filled with a block of Palladium. Accompanied by, click, voice, Tony reached into his shirt and took out the arc reactor. With a sniff, a scorched Palladium block was spit out from the chamber of the arc's reactor. Tony took it out and threw it in the trash can in the distance. Then he waited for the reaction furnace to finish smoking, and then he pressed in the brand new Palladium block. After loading in the arc reactor compartment, Tony pressed the arc reactor into his chest again. Accompanied by the refunction of energy, Tony's originally purple-green face gradually eased. Tony looked at Eno's mouth and said, look at how deep our friendship is. If you wanted to kill me just now, I just need to take him away. I couldn't even beat a baby at that time. Eno instantly smiled angrily. There are too many opportunities to kill you, I didn't even start. Tony shrugged in agreement, really. It's just that Eno didn't do it. Eno looked at Angela and Zhao Hailun, bring his special medicine and thinner. The two of them nodded, and went to the underground laboratory together to get things up. After a while, Tony looked at the medicine packet and an injection in his hand and looked at Eno. Just then you lied to my steel armor. Quote, obviously Tony didn't think it was worthless, he just felt that these two things didn't look like high tech, so he just complained about it. But Eno didn't bother to talk to him. He took the injection directly from Tony's hand and immediately stuck it on his neck and injected it into the vein. Oh, your hands are so fast. Tony screamed in pain and took time to admire. But next, the code-like veins on Tony's neck were immediately diluted. Tony shook his neck and took a deep breath. Wow, it feels like I suddenly came back to life, the steel armor is worth it again. Eno threw away the empty thinner with his backhand. Then he took the box that Angela handed over and said, there are 90 packets of special medicine and 6 needles of thinner. It's your 1-month measurement. After the special medicine is soaked, you have to drink 3 packs of 500 milliliters of water a day. The thinner is injected every 5 days, but you have to remember. It can only slow your palladium poisoning, but can't prevent your palladium poisoning. Tony put away the box, and extended a hand with Eno gratitude. You are so thankful for what you are doing, it seems I took advantage of it. Eno looked at the Mark's armor next to the bookcase at this time. Why does Tony feel that he made a profit after taking some medicine? Tony, you shook his head when you heard it. If it weren't for Pepper, I would have donated Stark a long time ago. I don't even have a child, so what legacy is left? But now I have Pepper, and she has been with me for so many years, and she has been with me every day, so she is my home. Tony meant, if it weren't for Pepper, he would be prepared to want nothing. Mark's battle armor is because of deep love. If you help me, then I will help you too. At this time Angela and Helen have gone to the underground laboratory to study, and they don't have time to listen to the two of them here. Eno patted Tony on the shoulder. I feel like your last words. You still speak so directly. Tony smiled directly. Stop talking about this, let's talk about something happy. It's my birthday in 3 days. According to my past habits, I will open one. Will you come? I'm going to die and I'm still in the mood. No loss as Tony Stark. Eno shrugged and took a trip to the sofa, although I don't like it very much. But it doesn't matter. If this is your last party, maybe it will be your last birthday party. If Tony can't solve the palladium element poisoning, he will definitely not survive his second birthday. He didn't even arrive for a month. Tony nodded in a complicated mood. He sat on the sofa and said solemnly with his fingers crossed, to be honest, I really can't help it. I have tried every combination of elements and every combination of elements. But neither method can replace the palladium element in our ARC's reactor. I really can't find any way, otherwise I won't be here. Indeed, according to Tony's character, if he finds a way, Tony would have stayed in his own laboratory to tinker with these things. And now, he really has no choice. Eno patted him on the shoulder. Science has no certainty, it does not exist 100% and 0%. Maybe you still have other elements that you haven't discovered. Who said that there are only these elements in the world? Although Tony nodded, he still said with a heavy face, you were right, but my time is running out. If I look for a brand new element, I don't even know if it is useful. The time now only allows me to find an element that has been found in the world. But these, I have tried them. Tony's tone is low and his expression is lonely. It's not that he is not a genius, but that he feels that he has done his best. All the elements in the world have been tried. Time does not allow me to invent. What else can I do? Nick Fury will give Tony the relic of Tony's father, Howard Stark, after a while. And Tony will finally discover new elements that have already been discovered here. That is the cube of the universe, the in-phase elements of space gems. The room fell silent. Tony suddenly raised his head and reacted. Why am I saying these sad words again? Saying that, Tony stood up, carried the suitcase Eno gave him and walked out of the office. I'm going back first. After 3, I remember to come to my house at noon. Let's prepare together. After watching Tony go, Eno got up from the sofa and walked to his boss chair. At this moment, Nick Fury called. Eno, the matter between you and Tony in Monaco has a great impact, but it basically doesn't matter to you, but to Tony. Eno directly went on to say, when Senator Stern used words to induce the people to think that Iron Man is not only owned by one person or a hero. People who are induced will think that they can become heroes themselves, and they can also become Iron Man. Then why doesn't Tony publish his technology for the whole world to have? After hearing Eno's explanation, Fury agreed on the phone. Yes, so the situation is terrible now. Hill is trying his best to appease the upper echelons of the government not to use armed forces to go to the last step. Tony's military friend Lieutenant Colonel Roddy is also doing his best to appease the upper echelons. But now only Tony is still there, to live in a muddle-headed way. So, we hope you, someone who knows Tony deeply and is still his best friend, will guide him. Hearing this, Eno understands. But it is true that Tony even confessed that Palladium is poisoned. Only Eno. When Eno saw a little sign, Tony just said it plainly. This is none of the people Tony knows. Eno also pretended to Ferry bluntly. Tony is not working hard, but he has no direction. He tried everything he could. Tony told me that he really couldn't find a substitute for Palladium in his body. No, I haven't finished it yet. Nick Fury said suddenly. What do you mean? Eno pretended to hesitate and said, there are other elements in this world that are already known. I can't guarantee, but it is possible. Nick Fury simply said, Even if you are Tony's best friend, I can only briefly talk about this matter. In this incident, Ivan Vanki's father and Tony's father have a great relationship. And Tony's father left Tony some important relics. There are probably things in the relics that can solve Tony's current problems, but no one knows. Otherwise, Ivan Vanki's imitated arc reactor would be impossible to produce. When I finish dealing with the affairs between the government and the people, I will ask Tony to give him his father's belongings. So during this time, Tony's mind and spirit are likely to be unstable, and he needs you to comfort him. Director Ferry, there are some things he didn't do if you thought you were going to do it. Eno said, if Tony gets rid of his bad habits, he is still a good friend. S.H.I.E.L.D. He always establishes a level for people, but no matter what level he is not the criterion for judging a person. Human heart is not a measurable standard by data. I will do my own thing, and you can just look at the others and cooperate. After that, Eno doesn't care. Ferry's reply directly hung up. The words of the king of agents just now were full of analysis of Tony and his own value. Although this may be his occupational disease in daily life, etc. But Eno's own practices and things do not require others to arrange and affirm. That's it. Night. After Eno, Angela, and Helen returned home. The two of them couldn't wait to take a bath. Helen used to just take a shower. Now she is taken by Angela and likes to take a bath. Take a bottle of wine from the wine cellar to the balcony on the second floor. Eno lay on the couch of the lazy man and watched the night scene. This action is almost his daily task. Bu screamed. Eno opened the bottle. He was just about to blow into his mouth. The phone's ringtone rang. Rodriguez's call. After switching on. Mr. Eno, the reason for sending the ghost to be your bodyguard for half a month has been found. Do you need it now? If you wait until the next time, you need more reasons. Eno thought for a while. Let her come by herself tomorrow. No problem. I hope that the umbrella company can also develop the technology for regenerating severed limbs faster. Rodriguez agreed. Eno took a sip of wine and looked at the starlight seascape and said, it's already in the project, but we can't fully develop this technology now. However, as long as we have free R&D personnel, they will all fall to the Department for Research and Development. Rodriguez said thankfully, that's enough, thank you so much. Eno replied briskly, it's okay, it's all mutually beneficial. After a few more polite words, he hung up. Eno took another sip of wine and sighed as he looked at the night view. What is the research and development? He hasn't mentioned it. I really let the umbrella go to study, and there is too much money to panic. As for whether you can reply after 3 years, at that time, he will be able to solve it. For the people nowadays, a fake trick that ordinary people can't see is enough. Real neurotechnology is impossible for civilian use. What are you thinking about? At this moment, the sound of slippers came from behind Eno. Accompanied by the sound, there is a fresh fragrance that has just finished bathing. Eno likes a faint fragrance, and Angela has always been like this. He clicked and walked to Eno's side, and Angela curled up into Eno's arms lying on the sofa. Smelling the scent of Angela's hair, Eno said, how about the sub-health medicine? Angela rubbed her head against Eno's chest. Hulk's blood surface analysis has been done. We are still collecting and researching how to make a drug suitable for everyone. Otherwise, if the dose is too high, the user will die from organ load failure. If the dosage is less, the user will have no effect at all. Useful, useless, or death are under extremely small control, and you can't be careless. Eno nodded, and placed the wine in his hand in front of Angela to indicate whether to taste it. Angela smiled and took the wine and took a sip. Then he still. Eno sticks out his tongue and sips the wine from the corner of his mouth. That posture is full of charm. Well, you can hook my fire. Eno put the wine bottle on the table, took Angela in his arms and walked to the bedroom. The next day. It's another day's daily affairs. Eno is very fortunate that his umbrella company affairs are not of the kind. To study departmental affairs, you only need to look at the report. The sales department affairs also look at the statistical report. There is also a red umbrella department, which can be said to be the most worry-free place for Eno, because the management is very strict. There are other job departments and so on. This is actually quite worry-free. Eno only needs to deal with large matters and make decisions. Next, Eno takes a look at the situation on the internet. But apparently Tony is still on the cusp of the storm. The ignorant people actually want to make Tony hand over the technology, and they can also be Iron Man. Isn't this an idiot? Then there are some people who see the Whiplash and there is an arc reaction furnace and feel this. They should also have things. This led this group of people to fight Tony on the internet and in reality. However, among so many people who targeted Tony, only a handful of them scolded together with the umbrella. But obviously he will scold more after he finishes scolding. After all, the reputation of the umbrella is not a joke. Seeing this, Eno sighed. Well, there are really too many people who are easily brought up by the rhythm in reality. They are indiscriminate, don't understand the reason, don't understand the process, and don't understand the result, just follow the trend. As long as anyone brings up a little wave, these people can make a big wave for you. Eno shook his head. So that's why there are so few wise men in the world, because there are too many idiots. Eno continues to deal with affairs in the office and observe the speech on the internet. But after a while, Eno looked at the computer without lifting his head and said, I pour the coffee by myself, I didn't make it on the sofa beforehand. Ava. As the space in front of the desk fluctuated, a girl in a white hooded suit appeared. She stood at Eno's desk and looked at Eno incredulously. Those eyes were full of unknown and curiosity. He obviously didn't even lift his head. Moreover, he directly used his ability to enter through the wall. Nothing was exposed silently. Eno's eyes moved away from the computer screen. He looked at Ava and smiled. We can talk when we sit on the sofa. Ava froze for a moment, then turned and walked to sit on the sofa. It was not the actual purpose of Eno to ask her to sit on the sofa. His actual purpose is to let Ava know that she was sent to protect. Eno. Asking her to sit on the sofa is actually a way of giving orders. Let her know that she has a command level in it. The next thing is to deepen the impression and how to make her rebel against S.H.I.E.L.D. Bureau. After Ava was on the sofa, those eyes kept staring at Eno for answers. That means, you said that I sat here and you just talked about it. Looking at her small eyes, Eno smiled and asked, what's your name? Ava Star, mission nickname, Ghost. Ava said directly. These news are not important, and there is nothing to say, and she also believes that Eno can't investigate her information. But what she didn't know was that Eno knew everything. Eno nodded. How old? Ava. 1 year old and 11 months. Only 1 year older than me. Eno looked at Ava and asked, enter S.H.I.E.L.D. How long is the special department? Ava thought for a while and wondered if she could answer this question. After a while, she replied, I have joined S.H.I.E.L.D. since my childhood when my parents died. Of course there are other and more detailed ones, but Ava chose not to say it because Eno didn't let herself say more detailed ones. After hearing Ava's explanation, Eno remembered, no wonder he now sees why Ava is so young and only 19 years old. It turns out this is Ava 8 years ago. Eno nodded. How painful is the feeling of tearing molecules throughout the body? Is there any 4th grade pain? The World Health Organization divides pain levels into 5 levels. Level 0. No pain. Level 1. Mild, intermittent pain, about bruises and falls. Level 2. Moderate, persistent pain, painkillers can be used, about the pain above the toothache. Level 3. Severe, continuous pain, no painkillers, relief, about broken bones and pieces of meat. Grade 4. Severe, continuous pain until there are changes in blood pressure and pulse, about severe burns. Ava stood up abruptly, and she looked at the man in front of her. S.H.I.E.L.D. The information is so well investigated and I am a secret department, the information is sealed in physical files. Ava asked in shock. You know my physical condition. Eno held her left hand on the table and said, because of the explosion of the quantum channel experiment, the molecules in your body are fused with this ability. This allows you not only to be invisible, go through walls, avoid injuries, etc., you get unparalleled pain. That's a kind of pain that is better than death in the whole body and mind. Following Eno's words, Ava shuddered. That kind of pain, she doesn't want to experience it anyway, but she will experience it every once in a while. And in the past 10 years, the interval between her pains has become shorter and shorter. But S.H.I.E.L.D. But there is no way. Does your molecular tearing interval still exist, shortening? Eno once again tells the fact that Ava's eyes widened. How did he know these detailed facts? What else do you know? Ava walked quickly to Eno's desk. She put her hands on the desk. Tell me. Ava believes that since Eno knows so much, she must still know more details about herself. And he is the world's largest biopharmaceutical umbrella company. Ava has no reason not to believe that Eno doesn't know other things. Eno didn't speak, but raised his head slightly and gestured to the sofa. Ava looked over and thought about it for a moment. She resisted the eagerness in her heart and walked to the sofa in 2 steps and sat down honestly, waiting for Eno to give out rewards, like a good boy. Seeing Ava sitting down obediently, Eno nodded and continued. The molecular structure of living things is strong, and as long as it reaches its limit, it will tear. And if it is torn, I don't need to say more about the consequences. Do you know how strong your body is or how good your physical fitness is? Ava was taken aback and reacted instantly. She immediately used her ability to leak out her Wheaton abdominal muscles. Then he raised his arm to let Eno look at her muscles. Puff. This operation made Eno amused. Ha 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 ha. Eno laughed for a long time, then forced a smile and asked, S.H.I.E.L.D. Bureau. That's how I explained to you and laughed so hard at me, why are you so stupid? Ava was taken aback again, and she asked eagerly, S.H.I.E.L.D. Bureau. As you said before, if I want to fight against the tearing of molecules in my body, I must strengthen my physical fitness. So as long as there is no task, I will do high-intensity training, and then make my body stronger. Ha 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 ha. Ava's explanation succeeded in making Eno laugh on the table again. He really didn't expect S.H.I.E.L.D. Unexpectedly came up with this trick in order to strengthen Ava's physical fitness. The key is that Ava still believed it. At this moment, the elevator of D suddenly sounded. Ava quickly used her ability to become invisible again. Angela walked out of the elevator. She looked at Eno, who had just finished laughing, and Ava, who was invisible on the sofa. Then he looked at Ava and asked, Is she a ghost? You can see me too. In an instant, Ava immediately come out. This is intuition, Angela explained. When a certain kind of creature is strong to a certain level, intuition and feeling are very sensitive. Like Eno, he will feel it when you look at him with a telescope a few kilometers away. Ava, this is so special that this kind of intuition can be found in the fairy magic world, but don't say it, it really does. He is called Peter Yi Ling. After talking about Angela, don't care. Ava, who was still silly, turned her head to look at Eno and asked curiously, You just laughed so happily, I haven't seen it in a few years. Angela was right. There are many occasions when Eno's mouth leaks a smile, but when he laughs, it is less pitiful. Angela would be curious about things that make Eno laugh. I tell you, Ava is in S.H.I.E.L.D. That's how it was fooled. Eno pulled Angela by his side and talked about what happened just now. After a while, Angela smiled in Eno's arms and her shoulders trembled. Fortunately, the boss chair is relatively large, otherwise the two would not be able to bear it. After a while, Angela rubbed her teary eyes and got up from Eno's arms. She wiped her tears and said, Ava, do you know where the molecules exist? Ava, who was not ridiculed at last, replied, Full body. You know it's the whole body, too. Angela laughed angrily. Then what's the use of your muscles? Physical fitness represents vitality, biological energy, lifespan, recovery ability, speed, defense, strength, endurance, etc. And your exercise is just to increase strength or endurance. This is just your external physical fitness, not your internal physical fitness. Ava, what do you mean? Ava seemed to understand something suddenly. Yes. Angela wiped away her tears and said, Exercise does not increase the strength of your body's cells and genes. So for you, exercise is actually not as effective as you rest, stay up less late, and work less in harsh environments. Otherwise, it will not resist your molecular tearing, but will increase the degree of molecular tearing in your body. The molecular structure can be strengthened by exercise. Kidding, this is the comprehensive physical fitness of a creature. You can also understand that from the moment you were born it was something determined by your genes. And the day after tomorrow has nothing to do with it. Of course, except for mutation or something. Hearing Angela's words, Ava lowered her head deeply, her fists creaked. She slowly asked in a deep voice, that is, S.H.I.E.L.D. Always lie to me. They just want to make my body stronger to perform tasks. Of course it's more than that. Eno volcano pouring oil. They say the antidote to study your body. Or the method is also fake. Do you know how much it costs to build a quantum channel? Do you know how much it costs to research the technology to save your body? Although Ava was so angry that she exploded at this time, she still held back her anger and shook her head gently at Eno. Eno explained to her, the former is still counted, maybe billions to tens of billions can be solved. But the latter, you just think of it as a bottomless hole or a black hole, just relying on that group, foolishness, and want to study quantum entanglement and molecular entanglement. Dreams, Tony, a professional, dare not say this, so just rely on them. So you think S.H.I.E.L.D. Will you build a device worth tens of billions less? What about the latter? Boom, click, a thunderbolt appeared in Ava's heart. Yes, she has been working for S.H.I.E.L.D. for so many years. How much has been solved? Even if the problem solved is worth a lot of value, it is still a drop in the bucket compared to the equipment. Not to mention the bottomless pit at the back. Thinking of this, Ava walked out the door as soon as she became invisible. She is going to S.H.I.E.L.D. Bureau. Ask clearly. You are not going to question S.H.I.E.L.D. Angela looked at the invisible Ava and asked. Ava's footsteps. She turned her head and looked at Angela. What else can I do? At this time, her tone was helpless and pitiful. The organization that has been fighting for many years is actually lying to itself. Not only that, they also make themselves worse. They promised me that I would heal myself. As a result, it will only become worse and worse. It turns out that they just use me as a tool person. Oh my God. Allah held his forehead with his left hand, and his right hand spread out helplessly. Do you think they will treat you this way even after you know this? They don't have your handle, don't you need your molecular stabilizer, and your suit is no longer needed. Hearing Angela's words, Ava raised her hands and squeezed tightly. After a while, she finally collapsed and said, what should I do? Isn't it waiting for myself to die? Seeing this, Eno shrugged. Look, how crazy the people who know they are going to die are. Tony is really good. It's possible for the average person to be crazy. There is nothing worse than knowing the time of your death. Besides, Ava only has less than 10 years. Angela glanced at Eno, and she was about to succeed. Just shatter her spirit again. Just crush her will again. She will become the ghost of the umbrella. Not S.H.I.E.L.D. The ghost. Angela nodded to Eno and then said to Ava, do you know how many years you still have to live? How many? Hearing Angela's words, Ava immediately flashed to Angela and asked eagerly. Eno watched Ava let out a nasal sound. It means, don't remember what I said when you came. Ava heard Eno's nasal sound, she opened her hands and 10 fingers and then clenched fiercely. This is not for Eno. She was just releasing the pressure to calm herself down. Look, this relaxed back and forth crushing spirit is a good guide. This is much better than Senator Stern's language skills. Senator Stern, learn something. After releasing the pressure, Ava walked to the sofa and sat quietly. Then put your hands on your knees and look at the floor under your feet. Don't look at her thinking that it was, calm down. Instead, this behavior is the tranquility before the storm. There is only one ignition sprout. Angela watched Ava sit back and continued. In any case, if you use the power multiple times, you should only live for about 8 years. But even if you don't use abilities from now on, you can only live for about 10 years, and there is not much more. The molecules in your body that have been torn apart by molecules since childhood are already very fragile. Don't look at the interval now getting shorter and shorter. In 5 years, you may once in 35 days or even once a day. This speed increases exponentially, just like the principle of snow mountain avalanche. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.